Hey guys, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Ino liked Naruto instead of Sasuke? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. A spiky bundle of sun-kissed hair stood out amongst the human traffic in the market area of Konoha. Bustling and hustling, ninja and citizens alike went about their daily duties. Boisterous market men and traders shouted their products and prices with huge grins on their face, while curious customers hopped shop to find what they are searching for. Shinobi of various ranks headed towards the gates with packs on their back. And unseen to the naked eye, Anbu forces leapt roof to roof, slipping in and out of shadows. Running through the streets, we find Naruto Uzumaki, a blonde-haired boy with a loopy grin on his face. Accommodating his bright smile were whisker-like birthmarks that stretched wide across his cheeks. His cerulean blue eyes were filled with eagerness. Or so that is how they seemed. If anyone really paid attention to them, there was a tinge of silver around his iris that gave his eyes somewhat of an icy look. The boy was short for his age, and was most certainly not the most fashionable person. Watch it, kid. Blue sandals led to orange, shin-length trousers. Garbed in a bright orange jacket with blue shoulders and white collars, the newly minted genin strolled down the streets, his hands interlocked around the back of his head. On his head, where green googles once adorned, the boy proudly donned the forehead protector of the village hidden in the leaves. The boy, while seeming jubilant on the outside, was in deep thought on the inside. I wonder what Gigi wanted, he thought to himself as he strolled. He was aware of the mild glares sent his way or the wide berth others he passed gave him. He mentally rolled his eyes at their ignorance. Of course, it's not like he cared. No, he had other things in mind that he needed to focus on instead of the petty foolishness of the villagers. After a while, the boy finally reached his destination. In front of him stood a tall red tower. Circular-shaped buildings littered the small compound, most significant of them being the one that adorned the insignia of fire. The Hokage's tower. Naruto could sense that everyone was already in the tower waiting in the Hokage's office. He could also sense the hidden Anbu around the compound. The boy had been woken up earlier by his Chunin sensei, Kakashi Hitaki, although he didn't really know if he could call the man that. He remembered his attitude on their most recent mission to the wave. He barely taught them anything, except for the Uchiha, of course. Naruto fought to roll his eyes at that. According to the silver-haired man, it would seem that the Hokage had requested an important meeting with the rookies of this year, so they were supposed to meet at the Hokage's office a half an hour past 7. The boy entered the building and walked along the curved, padded hallway towards the office. His steps echoed slightly throughout the hall, and he soon found himself in front of the large wooden door leading to his destination. Plastering on an idiotic grin on his face, foregoing protocol and general etiquette, he simply pushed the door open wide. "Mornin', old man," the Jinchuriki greeted his pseudo-grandfather. Hiruzen Sarutobi was only a shadow of what he once was during his prime. The old god of shinobi was nothing more than a tired old man who was called back into office after the death of his predecessor. Despite of his recline in power, the man was still hailed as an important figure in Konoha. His hair was now an ashen gray and his tanned tone was now lighter with wrinkles, and his face bore of liver spots. A grim expression was etched on his face as he looked at the individuals sitting in front of him in his office. Varying sets of persons watched with varying emotions running through them, ranging from fear to slight nervousness to absolute aloofness. Seated closest to the Hokage were 11 children, each one wearing different gear, but all had forehead protectors adorned on their head, signifying them as shinobi of Konoha. These children were Rock Lee, Neji Hyuga, and Tenten of Team 9, Shikamaru Nara, Ino Yamanaka, and Choji Akamichi of Team 10, Hinata Hyuga, Kiba Inuzuka, and Shino Aburame of Team 8, and Sakura Haruno and Sasuke Uchiha of Team 7. Team 7 were currently waiting on their last teammate who appeared to be late. Behind the children were the adults who were all wondering why they were there. These adults were in the persons of Mike Guy, sensei of Team 9, Asuma Sarutobi, sensei of Team 10, Kurenai Yuhi, sensei of Team 8, Kakashi Hitaki, sensei of Team 7, Hiyashi Hyuga, Yoshino Nara, Shikaku Nara, Choza Akamichi, Inochi Yamanaka, Sume Inazuka, Shibi Aburame, Kazashi Haruno and Mebuki Haruno. Each adult was a respective parent and Junin sensei of the 11 kids today. The Hokage had requested their presence for some reason only known to himself. Hokage-sama, permission to ask why we were summoned? The red-eyed genjutsu mistress of Konoha asked her superior. All in due time, Ms. Yuhi. We are just waiting for one more person to arrive. Hiruzen responded. Haha, I'd never thought I'd see the day Kakashi arrive earlier than someone, laughed a bearded man with a lit cigarette in his mouth. No doubt the baka would be late, Sakura fumed. Sakura. I'm sure Naruto has a good reason for, Kakashi started to explain before the door swung open, revealing a mop of golden hair that stood with the bright orange atrocity he called a jumpsuit. More an old man, the aforementioned Naruto shouted in greeting. With a feral grin, the vulpine youth flashed the peace sign at his Hokage. Good morning to you too, Naruto-kun. I'm glad to see you made it, the Hokage said. His wrinkled features seemingly vanished for a moment as he smiled at the son of his predecessor. Of course I'd make it, old man, Naruto said with a grin. Well, seeing that you are here now, we can finally start, Hiruzen started. He looked at the other occupants in the room while Naruto wedged himself between his teammates. His smile withered as a pronounced frown took its place. Hiruzen got up from his seat, before closing the door Naruto had left open. I'm an old man, and I'm nothing like I used to be back in my prime. Fortunately, there is no need for me to be as active as back in the past due to the somewhat peaceful era we're in, Hiruzen began. But, I'd no guarantee that this will always be so. I fear that there might be trouble in the future. My senseis had worked hard towards a peaceful time and both had achieved it somewhat, but if there is one thing I've learned from them is that there will always be war, no matter the era. At his statement, some of the battle-hardened veterans nodded their head in agreement. While it would be great to achieve true peace, that was too idealistic in the shinobi world. I understand what you are saying, Hokage-sama, but what does that have to do with us being here? Shikaku asked. I will be addressing that now, Shikaku. The Hokage spoke before turning to the rookie genin. You see, you 12 young ones represent the future of our village and each of you are the ones tasked in their upbringing. So for what I have planned for today, it is necessary for you all to be here. The Hokage gauges their reactions which altered from embarrassment to excitement to nervousness at his diction. What could possibly be so important that not only all the rookies and their teams had to be there, but their Junin senseis and parents had to be present as well? However, Naruto had an inkling of where this was going and didn't like it one bit. Lost in their thoughts, they had missed when the Hokage activated the privacy seals in the office that didn't go unnoticed by Naruto. But they didn't miss when he closed the blinds. What we say, do and discover in this room, stays in this room, are we clear? The man's voice was quick and sharp, channeling reserves of his strength that gave him his feared title. There are many techniques in this world that have been banned due to their nature. One such of this is a space-time jutsu that we will be using today. And what is the purpose of this jutsu? Kakashi asked, being the most familiar with these types of techniques. Having the yellow flash as his sensei and the ability of his eye, Kamui, he was head over shoulders compared to others when it came to space-time techniques. To see the future, Hiruzen answered without hesitation. What? Sakura shouted in disbelief. If she heard correctly, she would have been sure that the Hokage just said they were going to see the future. Yes, Sakura-chan, we will be able to see into the future with the usage of this technique. Specifically, all of yours. Sarutobi spoke while eyeing all of the Konoha 12. Awesome, Naruto yelled with idiotic grin on his face and stars on his eyes. On the inside, he was nervous. It wasn't the fact that he was afraid of the future, he was afraid about what his future would reveal. He ignored some of the glares and looks of annoyance others gave him at his outburst. But the possible Inochi tried to explain before he was cut off by the Hokage instead. Inochi, this is my decision, the hailed god of shinobi said as his eyes narrowed dangerously, or are you opposing my rules? No Hokage-sama, Inochi said as he lowered his head. Good, Hiruzen said in finality. Naruto, having heard everything the Hokage had said, had only one question to ask. Nay, old man, if I do this, will it tell me if I become Hokage or not? The cheerful boy asked as his eyes were squinched in speculation. Quite possibly, yes, Sarutobi answered. Cool, let's get this show on the road, Datbeo. Naruto yelled, giving the Hokage his signature good guy pose. What an idiot. The genin thought as they watched the hyperactive blonde. Hinata inwardly giggled at her secret crush. Hiruzen smiled and nodded at his ninja's request. Drawing from his sealing kit, he began to map out a matrix on the floor in front of the chairs. When he finished, he brought his hands together in a hand sign. The seals glowed blue on his command and the room was illuminated at the brief light show. Hiruzen turned back to the Konoha genin and offered a small smile. Alright, who would like to go first? Hiruzen asked. The genin said nothing, all looking at each other to see who would be the brave soul to be the first to see their first. Seeing that no one was moving, Neji scoffed and decided to step up. Before he could, Hiruzen spoke again. How about you, Naruto? He said, smiling at his pseudo-grandson. Since you're so eager. Naruto laughed a little nervously. Not wanting anyone to suspect anything, Naruto walked onto the ceiling matrix, outside giddily, but nervously on the inside. How does this work, old man? Naruto sheepishly grinned while the Hokage grinned at his antics. Just step onto the matrix and channel your chakra into it until the seal turns blue. You can stop then, okay? Hiruzen instructed. Okay, let's go into the future, Datbeo. Within seconds, the seal glowed and a seal on the wall began change into a small screen before flickering to life. It was a sunny day in Konoha. The great ninja village hidden deep in the land of fire, surrounded by the massive trees that led to its name, was a picturesque scene of prosperity. The low cawing of birds as they flew overhead and the gentle breeze that carried the leaves to its will. The village was prospering. The marketing district seemed to have expanded. Wow, it really does show us the future. I can't believe it, Ino commented with an awestruck look on her face. The platinum blonde was not alone as many others had the same expression to match. It's an ingenious technique, Hiyashi commented. Before this moment, he couldn't have imagined such a technique. He also saw the need to ban such technique, knowing that it could be dangerous in the wrong hands. In the village, persons could been walking their merry way, a smile on their face and a jig in their step. At least that was until a blonde blur rushed past them. Looking into the village, you can see that it was now covered in orange paint. The Hokage monument had been defaced again and the sides of buildings could be seen with a coat of orange. Running and hopping around, a boy could be seen escaping from the Anbu as well as Chunins and Junins. The boy looked around 16 and wore an idiotic grin on his face. He was slightly taller and wore a black jacket with orange pants and black ninja sandals. His familiar cerulean blue eyes gleamed with mischief and those distinguishable whisker marks accommodated his foxy grin. He wore a black-clothed ninja protector. Hiruzen could not help but sigh in exasperation at the blonde ninja who was sheepishly grinning with his hands at the nape of his neck. Naruto found this highly amusing. Kurama was laughing out loud at his container seeing that he pulled off that prank yet again. Baka, Sakura shouted at her teammate, even when you've grown up you're still an idiot. She chastised. Naruto winced a little at her screeching. Damn, Banshee. Tell me about it, Kurama commented as he cleaned his ears. Playing the part, he laughed nervously. Hee hee, once a good prank always a good prank, Datbeo, he said with a grin. Let's just get back to watching please. Shikamaru said exasperatedly. Get back here, Naruto, an angry Anbu yelled as they chased them. Naruto laughed as he changed directions and began running through the streets. The Anbu found it hard to keep up with the blonde as he jumped through and slid over carts and stands. When they thought they cornered him, two men were moving. A large mirror appeared in the path of the chase. Scared they were going to run into it, the Anbu skidded to a stop. Just as Naruto was about to run into the mirror, he smoothly slid under the mirror before getting back onto his feet just as smooth, continuing his fast momentum as he ran away from the ninja that was still chasing him. When he saw them still tailing him again, he ran into the market district. Screams, shouts, and profanities could be heard as the ninja chased him through the district. While Naruto made his way through the people and stand smoothly, the ninja kept running into things and destroying carts. There was one Junin that almost had him, but got stuck in a cart as the blonde literally jumped through its opening before landing right back his feet and kept running. The other ninja looked at him shocked. You become as troublesome as ever, Shikamaru said with a sigh. The adults in the room sweat dropped at the future blonde's actions while the Hokage looked slightly shocked at the fact that Tsunade's face was on the monument. Naruto just smirked, an expression that went unnoticed by everyone except a certain shy Hyuga, who looked at him curiously. "When will you ever grow up, Naruto?" Kakashi said, shaking his head. Was Sasuke's response, agreeing with Kakashi. After he got them off his tail, he lead on the hopeless ninja for several hours before sneaking off into the woods. He was running through the trees before he stepped on a broken branch and began to tumble through the trees before hitting the forest floor. Everyone in the room burst into laughter seeing the knucklehead clumsily fall out of the tree. "That's totally you, Naruto," Ino said as she laughed. "Once an idiot, always an idiot," Kiba said as he rolled on the floor in laughter. "It was just an accident, Datbeo," Naruto said as a tick mark formed on his head. "It's okay, Naruto-kun." Hiruzen comforted as he chuckled. Naruto just pouted at his grandfather. "Alright everyone, back to the screen," he said as his laughter died down. Once everyone settled, they continued to watch the screen. "Ow," Naruto said as he laid on the ground on his back. His eyes were closed as he rubbed his head. "Are you okay, Naruto-kun?" a sweet, angelic voice called out. Naruto opened his eyes only to be met with a pair lavender, pupil-less ones looking down into his. He lightly blushed and scratched the side of his cheek. The girl was blushing as well as she looked down at the blonde who had fell from the trees. "Hi, Hinata-chan," he said as he began to sit up. "I'm fine, just had a little fall," Naruto said as a lump formed on the top of his head. "Since when did Hinata become Hinata-chan?" Ino mused loudly. Kurenai and Hiruzen looked amused while Hiashi narrowed his eyes at Naruto. Naruto chuckled nervously as Hinata began to blush. Little fall, Naruto-kun?" Hinata slightly giggled. Naruto smiled at her giggle and grinned sheepishly as he began to scratch the back of his head. A trait he inherited from his father. "Yeah, just a little one," he said with a grin still adorning his features. Here, let me help you," Hinata said as she grabbed the healing cream Naruto recognized she gave him at the exams. "It's fine, Hinata-chan." Naruto tried to explain, but was cut off by Hinata who was already rubbing his bump with her ointment. Naruto had to admit that her ministrations felt good. He loved the way her gentle hands felt against his skin. He closed his eyes and hummed in contentment as he massaged it into his scalp. Hinata was surprised at how quickly it was healing. Once she was done, she realized what she was doing and blushed before backing away a little. "Gomen, Naruto-kun," Hinata said as he put her head down. Realizing she had stopped, he opened his eyes and looked at her. He wondered why she was so far away. He stood up and saw that her head was down. He could tell by the redness of her face she was blushing. He smirked and walked up to her. He trapped her on the tree, her back on the tree while his left hand rested on the tree, above her head. He brought his right hand to her chin and lifted her chin so she could face him. Her blush seemed to deepen as she realized what position they were in as she looked into his cerulean blue eyes. It was then that she realized the flecks of silver in them as well as its black outline that made his blue eyes pop out. "Arigato, Hinata-chan," Naruto said with a sincere smile. It was nothing, Naruto-kun," Hinata said looking away from his gaze. She was confused. When she looked into his eyes, she saw it filled with love. But why would he love her? He had never shown his interests in her before. Sure, he was always kind to her, but she assumed it was just because of his kind-heartedness. Hinata was cut out of her musings when she felt his breath tickle her neck and ear. She turned beet red. "Allow me to repay you in full for your kindness, Hinata-chan," he said huskily into her ear. Hinata fought the urge to faint at how close he was to her. How's so?" she sputtered. "By treating you to dinner, of course," he said cheerfully as he backed away from her, giving her breathing room. Trying to compose herself, Hinata finally spoke. "I don't know," Hinata said nervously. Come on, please, 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 please." Naruto begged as he got on his knees before her. He was whining like a little child, causing Hinata to giggle at his childishness. "I promise it won't be ramen. I'll buy anything you want to eat," he said as he grabbed her hand. "Unless you'd rather me eat something else, that is," Naruto said as he looked at seductively while kissing her hand. Hinata felt her face heat up. Naruto," she squealed in embarrassment. Who knew he could be such a pervert? Naruto grinned at her before getting back on his feet and releasing her hand. Great. Pick you up at 8, okay? Naruto said as he began to run off. But, Hinata said, I promise you won't regret it. Naruto said as he winked at her before disappearing into the trees. The clearing was silent for a while as Hinata processed what happened. When it finally clicked that Naruto had just asked her out on a date, Hinata had the biggest grin on her face. She surprised herself when she didn't even faint at the thought of the idea. Looking at the sky, she realized it was around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Seeing she only had 3 hours, rushed back to the compound to get ready. She wondered what the blonde had planned for her. End scene. Hinata had fainted by the time the scene ended. The adults were shocked at what played out before them. Naruto was blushing while Hiashi was glaring daggers into the boy's skull. Hiruzen chuckled lightly while Kurenai tried to wake her student up. Tsume tried hard not laugh at Hiyashi's expense. After a couple of moments of silence, Ten broke the silence. Well, that was climatic, she replied. Tell me about, Ino said as she thought about what they just watched. Who knew Naruto could be such a pervert? She said with a smirk. Before Hiashi could respond, Lee commented. Look, it's starting again, he pointed out as the screen began to flicker back on. Everyone quieted down as another scene began to play. Naruto was currently standing on the Hokage's monument. Beside him was a tall man that was dressed in all black. He had a fox mask on his face that covered the black facial mask underneath, like Kakashi's. He had black hair and wore a black cloak that had the kanji for kitsune in blood red. Both him and Naruto were standing there looking at the destroyed village before them. A man with orange hair and purple eyes with rings around them was floating in the air in the midst of the destruction. He had these weird piercings all over his body as he looked down on the village as if he were some god. The adults in the room quickly recognized one of Konoha's most feared Anbuin commander, Operative Kitsune, widely known as the Crimson Fox. They looked shocked to see Naruto beside one of the Leaf's most powerful shinobi. What happened to the village? Hiruzen asked, surprised. Isn't that the Anbu commander? Kurenai said. What? Sakura asked confused. What do you mean Anbu commander? All the genin turned to Kurenai for an explanation, including Naruto. Well, that man on the screen is Anbu Commander Fox. He is the head of our elite forces and only second to the Hokage. Kurenai explained. So why is Naruto standing next to the commander? Ino asked. They all turned to Naruto who had an idiotic look on his face. What? I don't know, he said frantically. Ask future me, he said as he waved his arms like a chicken. Everyone's sweat dropped at this. Maybe we can find out if we continue watching, Shikamaru said irritatingly. Everyone nodded and continued to look at the screen. Sensing someone was close, Naruto disappeared from his spot and hid behind a tree. Not long after, an Anbu operative landed beside the commander and bowed in respect before speaking. Taiko, the operative greeted. The commander turned to face the Anbu member, signaling that he was listening. There have been 5,000 casualties. The Hokage has attempted to subdue the invader, but hasn't succeeded. Over the 50% of the village has been destroyed, sir. The operative reported. The commander turned away from his subordinate and looked at the destruction of the village. Thank you, Neko. Go aid and assist anyone who needs your assistance. I will handle the rest. He ordered. Hi, Neko said before disappearing from the monument. A couple minutes after he left, Naruto appeared beside the commander again, looking at him. The commander turned to Naruto and nodded at him. Naruto nodded back at the commander before disappearing in a yellow flash. Everyone's eyes widened at what he just did. Kakashi looked at his genin in disbelief. How did he learn sensei's jutsu? He thought as he narrowed his eyes at the blonde who looked shocked himself. Everyone in the room was silent. Hiruzen looked at the screen in surprise and also in pride, although he wondered how Naruto could have found out so early. In a flash, Naruto appeared in front of his red-haired man who was attached to some machine. He looked very sickly and weak. Beside him was a woman with purple hair and wore a coat with red clouds on it. She was about to attack until the red-haired man raised his hand ordering her to stop. The red-haired man stared at the blonde who was looking back at him, showing no emotion. So you're Jiraiya's other apprentice, the red-haired man said. Seeing that you know of my master, I can only assume that you were an apprentice of his as well. Isn't that right, Nagato? Naruto said in a monotone voice. Konan looked shocked while Nagato just stared at the boy. Why? Naruto asked firmly. For peace. Nagato answered. This cycle of hatred, the hearts of mankind, there will never be true peace in this world without someone to guide them. Someone who has seen the darkness of this world. Someone who has found a way. And you're that person, I presume. Naruto deadpanned. Tell me something. Who do you think you are to dictate which road to peace this world takes? You must think you're Kami herself. I am a god, Nagato said. It is I who has the power to end the darkness of the world. Hatred has run rampant in this era and I will be the one to be its guiding light. I will bring the pain of understanding. Naruto laughed hysterically at the man. Nagato fumed while the woman named Konan looked a bit uneasy. After his fit of laughter, Naruto finally spoke. You are no god, Nagato. Naruto stated. You are only a mere mortal who is given power to do someone else's dirty work. You are just like your paths. Simple puppets who do what they are instructed to do. I don't know what Jiraiya has taught or told you, however, what you have said seems like a twisted version of his teachings. Nagato growled at the blonde. Naruto felt himself be pierced with chakra rods in his arm and in his leg. He fell to the ground as he began to feel foreign chakra enter his system. How dare you? A mere child telling a higher being what he is and what he is not. You have seen the destruction I could bring to a village. That is what true power is. The ability to destroy and create. Your generation know nothing of pain. Therefore, they will never understand what true peace is. So I have done what other feared to do and shown you. Nagato roared. It was silent. The only thing that could be heard in the chamber is Naruto's heavy breathing as he endured the piercing that was currently stuck in his leg. Konan suddenly saw red chakra come from the boy's body. She got into a defensive stance. Naruto chuckled as he began to stand and pull the chakra rods out. I agree with you, you know. Naruto said as he wiped the blood from the side of his mouth. There is no such thing as true peace. There is only the choices we make on the path we take. Everyone has their own idea of what peace is. You believe that this world needs a god to control them and show them way. Jiraiya believed that peace could be achieved through a child of prophecy. The sage himself hoped that by teaching man the art of ninshu would be a way towards peace. Naruto stated as he pulled the rods out of himself. However, I think that you all are wrong. Nagato didn't know whether be shocked or angry at the boy's statement. Konan said nothing, just staring at the boy who was challenging her leader's ideals. It was silent for a while until Nagato spoke up. What do you mean? The redhead asked. The cycle of hatred will never end. In that case, you are correct. However, taking someone's free will and trading it for your own is not peace. It is dictatorship, Naruto said. Peace can only be maintained, not given or received. The only way to maintain it is through cooperation and understanding. Something that has to be in the will of the people. You cannot force peace. People will make their own choices and decisions. People will follow their own path whether it is good or bad. No matter what way you slice it, destruction, murder, and betrayal will always trail the path of peace, which is why there will never be true peace. That is our reality. And that will be the reality of generations to come. He continued. Light and darkness are coexisting forces. You can't have one without the other. Because of this phenomenon, whether it be a world of light or a world of darkness, its opposite will always be lurking in its depths. He stated. So now that I have broken it down to you, you see why I believe you are all wrong. Why I believe a mission towards lasting peace is not only foolish, but futile. Good and evil will always exist. The only thing that would change is how people define it. He concluded. Nagato sat in silence for a long time, thinking about what the young Jinchuriki had said. Konan looked at her leader and could tell that he was in deep thought. She looked back at the blonde and saw that he was completely healed and sitting on the ground in a meditative stance. She looked back at Nagato, who was staring at the boy intently. After a couple of moments, Nagato finally spoke up. You make a convincing argument, Naruto-san. Nagato commented. You are very wise for your age. You will find that I am not like the rest of my generation, Nagato. Naruto said, still meditating. I do not buy fairy tales and false hopes. I am aware of what this world is and can become. I do not deal with pipe dreams and illusions. I live in reality and truth. If you didn't come to kill me, why are you here? I can see that if you really wanted to kill me, you would have already done so. Nagato asked curiously. I came here to understand. Naruto stated bluntly. I am not a closed-minded person. Everyone has a reason for choosing the path they have chosen. Just by listening to your ideals, philosophies, and commentary, I can tell that you are a man that has experienced the inner darkness of this world. A darkness that has caused you great pain. So you bring pain to others, bringing the darkness to them. All to prove a point. That this world has dark roots. You want people to seek revenge to prove that the cycle of hatred will always continue. You want to prove that the only way to true peace is if someone controls the world with their own, God-given power. Naruto continues. However, that is not where your tale gets interesting. He commented. Oh, really? Nagato replied, wondering where the boy was going. Indeed. You see, I was being honest when I said you were nothing more than a puppet. Naruto stated. You're nothing more than a pawn in someone else's game. A distraction even. Whoever is behind the scenes controlling this little organization of yours must have similar ideas of yours, however, not quite the same way in achieving those ideas. I must confess, Nagato, you are a formidable shinobi. The Rinnegan is a powerful dojutsu that could rival both the Sharingan and Byakugan. It is because of the power you hold that your leader has treaded lightly in his dealings with you. Naruto admitted. However, you must remember Nagato, that power such as a dojutsu is a mere tool. I can see that without your ocular proneness, you would be nothing. So my reason for being here is for answers. Naruto said as he opened his eyes. And also your response. Response? Nagato asked. Yes, I have pointed out the flaws of your theory of true peace. Not only have I pointed it out, but you have proven it yourself that there is no such thing as a true or perfect peace. It is an ideology that gives people a goal and for others, hope. Naruto explained. So tell me, what are you going to do, now that we have had this little chat? Are you going to continue down this path you chose or choose another? Remember that all choices have consequences. Nagato thought about it. He had to admit that the blonde was right, which shocked him immensely. Listening to his reasonings and how he totally constructed and deconstructed his beliefs and ideas as well as that of their sensei was surprising. He could only come to one conclusion during his conversation with the young boy. No, man. He knew pain. When he looked into the blonde's eyes, he could see the understanding they had as well as the wisdom behind his words. Seeing that the shinobi in front of him could kill him anyway, he conceded. Very well, Naruto-san. I leave this mission to you. Nagato said weakly as he turned to Konan. Naruto nodded, understanding what the redhead meant. You know that I am dying, my dear. My body is weak and unable to move on my own. I cannot keep living like this. Nagato said to the woman. He saw tears prick the side of her eyes. Please do not mourn for me, Konan. This dead life of mine is a miserable life. While I thank you for helping me and sticking by my side for all these years, I ask that you allow me this. Allow me to pass on and leave this path of pain. Naruto? Nagato called out. Naruto could hear his voice waver. Yes, Nagato? Naruto asked as he stood and looked at the man. I want to thank you for opening my eyes to things. He said with a small smile. I also want to thank you for your understanding. I can see that you are one with the ability to break many barriers. It's no problem. I'm only doing what is honorable and practical. Naruto responded. I do hope that your path is the right one, Naruto. And that after I pass, you'll bring understanding to this world. He said as he coughed to blood. Naruto nodded at him. He gave Konan one last look before his soul departed from his body. Nagato, widely known as Pain, was now dead. In the village, the floating figure in the middle of the destruction had now disintegrated into nothing but dust. Those present cheered as the 6 paths disintegrated one by one until they were no more. Tsunade quickly began to order the medics to gather the wounded and help those who needed to help. Sakura, Hinata, and Ino were right by her side helping. Naruto turned to Konan, who had tears streaming down her face as she looked at her deceased leader and lover. You should not cry for the dead, for they are not here to wipe your tears. He said solemnly. I do ask that you bury him somewhere discreet. I also ask that you destroy his eyes. They could be dangerous in the wrong hands. Konan nodded as she picked up the dead body of her lover and began to leave the chamber. Before she could go, Naruto gave her one final word. Leave in peace, Konan-san. I can tell that you loved that man very much and deeply care for him. Naruto said. I beg that you obey his wishes and find happiness as you continue your path. It may be hard right now, but in due time, you should live your life to the fullest. Do not be depressed over his death, for you would not want you to share the life of misery he once lived. A heart is easily broken, but hard to fix. Just remember that a broken heart is not a broken glass. While it may be hard to fix, it doesn't mean it can't be. Find your happiness again, Conan, and find it for his sake as well as yours. Naruto concluded as he bursted into blood, out of existence, revealing itself to be a blood clone. Conan stood there for a while thinking about what the blonde said. She then looked back at the red-haired man she held in her hands. Her tears began to spill from her eyes again. She knew she had to be strong. He asked her not to mourn him, yet that's all her heart is doing. Tears flowed from her eyes as she exited the chamber. I will try for you, Nagato. Conan whispered as she made her way away from Konoha. Then the scene ended. Everyone was quiet. Even the Hokage was speechless. There were many emotions going on through the room. Naruto felt a little uncomfortable at the silence. The genin looked between a mixture of shock and dumbfoundedness, while the adults of the room looked thoughtful and confused. After minutes of silence, Ino decided to speak. Wow, she said. Who would have ever thought that Naruto could be so incisive? Shikamaru thought out loudly. You aren't the only one surprised, Sakura said. I mean, what would a baka like him know about anything? Hey, I may be dumb, but I'm not that stupid. Naruto yelled as he waved his arms crazily. The question is how, Shikaku said. What do you mean, Shikaku? Inochi asked curiously. The future Naruto had the eyes of a war veteran, something someone his age shouldn't have. He also had the eyes of a killer. He couldn't have been no more than 17 at the time scene taken place. That's only 5 years from now. Shikaku explained. So you're saying that there could have been a possible war not too far into the future? Hiashi asked. Possibly, Shikaku said as he rubbed the bottom of his chin. The Hokage looked at Naruto worried as he watched the boy scratch his head with chinky eyes as he looked like he was thinking or something. While it's not how Naruto usually thought, he had to put on the act of idiocy to throw off the Nara. Sometime they were just too perceptive for their own damn good. Just before anyone else could speak, the screen began to light up again. Again, Kiba said. Some of the other genin groaned as well. Sasuke was tired of talking about the dobi, while Sakura was eager to see if she would be with her Sasuke-kun. Neji could care less, while Ino and Tenten wondered when his turn would be over. Choji just munched on his food while Lee and Hinata looked at the screen expectantly, wondering what was going to happen next. They all watched the screen as another scene began to play. There was a small band of people walking towards the gates of Konoha. In front, were 3 people leading the group. In middle was a tall man with 2 women accompanying him. He stood at around 6 feet 3 inches in height, and you could tell he was burly. He wore a cage hat that was all black with white brimming. There was a kanji for whirlpool, whoa, in front of his hat like all the other cage hats, and had black draping around the hat like most of the Hokages. He wore a red cloak with black flames at the bottom and had kanji for Godem Azukage on the back of his cloak. For clothing, he wore black shinobi pants, black sandals, a black long-sleeve shirt, and a black flank jacket. On his face was a black facial mask that covered the lower half of his face. The only thing that could be seen were his alluring blue eyes anyone could get lost in if you looked up. He also had his right arm bandaged. Beside him on the left was a woman with sandy blonde hair and teal eyes. Her hair was gathered into 2 consecutive pigtails and bangs that were combed to the left side of her forehead. She wore short-sleeved black kimono that reaches down to her legs, with slits along the side and a revealing neckline. She had a red sash tied around her waist and wore fingerless black gloves. She stood at 5 feet 8 inches and carried a giant tesson on her back as she walked with the man. On his right was another woman with midnight indigo hair and lavender, pupil-less eyes, signifying that she was a Hyuga. Her hair was long and stopped at her butt. She had front and side bangs that covered her forehead and framed the side of her face. She wore a short-sleeved light purple kimono with dark purple flowers on it that reached her feet slits on the side. She stood at 5 feet 9 inches and walked with a sun umbrella. Hiashi swallowed deeply. The stoic man had found it hard to breathe, seeing someone who looked so much like his late wife. Seeing her grow to look just like Hitomi brought back painful memories of when their time together and how she used to play with Hinata. He shook his head, pushing those thoughts in the back of his mind, and returned back to his usual stoic self. Whoa, is that Hinata? Sakura gasped. Geez, Hinata. You grew, Ino said. Hinata blushed at that statement. Who's the blonde chick? Ten asked. That would be the Kazekage's daughter, Hiruzen asked in shock himself. What? Kurenai said with her mouth gaped open. What's Hinata doing with the Kazekage's daughter? Kiba asked. I have a feeling we are about to find out, Shikamaru said as the scene continued to play. Behind the trio was a man and a woman with red hair. The man had short red hair that stopped at the nape of his neck and had chocolate brown eyes with a tint of violet in them. He wore brown armor with bandages wrapped around both arms. He stood at 6 feet 0 inches and was very lean and muscular. The woman had deep red hair that touched her tailbone and was up in a high ponytail. She wore a blue shirt with a sandy brown obi and a black shirt with black fishnet short under it. She stood at 5 feet 7 inches and wore a navy blue bracelet around her wrist. Both of them had forehead protectors on with an Edi symbol on it, signifying that they were shinobi of Uzumaki. The four people kept walking until they finally reached the gates. Once they gave the people at the front gate their passports, they continued to enter through the village. The streets buzzed with activity as people began to prepare for the upcoming festival that was in 3 days. All allied cages had been invited to come and enjoy Konoha's festival in honor of the alliance as well as talk about trade agreements and other political things. Shall we go find rooms for the night, Azukage-sama? The red-headed male asked. That won't be necessary, Kenshin. I already have a permanent residence here that we'll all be staying during our time here. His Azukage answered. His leader then turned around and placed a hand on Kenshin's shoulder. Enjoy your time here, Kenshin. You know, one of the reasons I brought you and Hinoka here was to enjoy yourselves. Both of you guys work too much and barely have any time together. Grab your wife and enjoy the village. You both deserve this break. The Azukage said with an eye smile. Kenshin smiled back and nodded at his leader. Thank you, Azukage-sama. Kenshin said gratefully as he grabbed the other woman's hand and ran off into the distance. The Azukage chuckled as he turned back around to his wives who were smiling at him. Shall we? He said as he offered both of his arms to each of his wives. They both grabbed his arms and they both continued to make their way to the tower. It's been a minute since we've been here, hasn't it, Naruto-kun? Hinata said as she watched a family walk past them with a smile. Naruto? Everyone said in shock. Hee, Naruto grilled sheepishly. Azukage? Hiruzen said to himself. However, everyone heard. Anyo, what's an Azukage? Ino asked. An Azukage is a cage of the village hidden in the whirlpools, the hidden Edi village. It's also known as Uzumaki. Hiruzen informed nervously. Uzumaki? Hiyashi asked with a raised eyebrow. Yes, Uzumaki. It was home to the infamous Uzumaki clan. They were most identified with their red hair. Hiruzen answered. Well, where it is? Why isn't it mentioned in the schoolbooks? Lee asked. Uzu was destroyed during the Second Shinobi War. It kind of phased out of existence by the end of the Third Shinobi War. Hiruzen exclaimed. Before anyone could ask any more questions, Naruto interrupted. Hey guys, the scene is still playing. Naruto yelled as he continued to look at the screen. A tick mark formed on Sakura's head. Quiet, Naruto baka, we're trying to get some answers here, she yelled. I actually think Naruto's right, Sakura. If we continue to watch the scene, maybe we'll be able to get more answers. Kakashi commented. Sakura huffed before she turned her attention back towards the screen. The trio was still walking through the streets. Indeed it has, my love. Naruto replied. I'm just happy that we finally get a chance to take a break. Tamari commented. Well, you wouldn't have to if you didn't work so much, Mari-chan. Hinata giggled. But you know how I am, Nata-chan. I have to have some action or else I'll just be bored. Tamari pouted. I think I have a solution. Naruto said with a smirk. You know, Hinata has already had 2 children, Mari-chan. Don't you think it's about time you've gotten knocked up, dear? Naruto said perversely. Tamari scoffed. You speak as if it's my fault. Besides, Nata-chan had twins so that doesn't count. She retorted. Well, you're never in your chambers when Naruto returns home, Tamari. Hinata regarded. Well, I work late. Tamari said nervously. Are you sure that's what it is or have you been avoiding me? Naruto asked curiously. You know you can talk to me about anything, Tamari. Hinata let go Naruto's arm and walked to Temari's left, linking her arms with hers. Tamari was now in the middle of them both. Are you afraid, Mari-chan? Hinata asked softly as Tamari turned away. Seeing her reaction, Naruto figured it would be a discussion they would probably need to have amongst themselves. Tell you what, how about you ladies tour the village while I go speak to the Hokage? I will meet you later at the compound, Naruto said. Understanding what Naruto was doing, Hinata grabbed Temari's hand and began to stroll down the street opposite of each other. He chuckled as he watched them leave. My Heim and desert flower, he said as he chuckled to himself. Then he grinned perversely. We should have plenty of fun tonight, he said as he licked his lips. He looked at the time and saw it was around 5:30. Deciding to take a shortcut, Naruto vanished in a yellow flash when no one was looking. He appeared in the Hokage's office, causing the current Hokage and Anbu to jump. Once the Hokage got over it, he looked at the newcomer and grinned. He stood up from the chair with the Hokage hat on and greeted his role model. Azukage-sama, the Hokage greeted as he bowed. Hokage-sama, the Azukage greeted back with a bow. The Hokage then took off his hat and placed it on his desk. He stood at 5 feet 11 inches with dark brown hair and dark blue eyes. He sported a beard and wore black ninja armor like his grandfather. His Hokage wear draped over him like a vest and he had the fire symbol on his shoulder pads in red. He still wore that blue scarf around his neck. He gave the Azukage a soft smile before speaking. It's good to see you, big brother Naruto, the Hokage said sincerely. Naruto pushed his hat back to where it was hanging low off his back. It revealed blonde spiky hair with long locks that covered each side of his face and were red near its tips. He had a black facial mask that covered his cheeks and sharp chin, but revealed his cerulean blue eyes that seemed more icy now. He gave his young student a smile as he walked up to him and hugged him. It's good to see you as well, Konohamaru, Naruto said as he pulled away from his younger companion. Konohamaru? Hiruzen and Asuma said in shock. Wow. He grows up to look more like you, Gigi, Naruto said cheerfully. Others couldn't help but nod in agreement. Isn't that brat that follows you around, Naruto? Sakura replied. Yep, but he's going to grow up to be a strong shinobi, Datbeo, Naruto said sheepishly. He cleans up nicely, Ino commented. He could even rival Asuma here in looks, Sume teased. Asuma rolled his eyes as he continued to watch the scene. Konohamaru sat on his desk as Naruto took the seat in front of him. So how have you been, boss? He said with a grin. Naruto grinned back even though he had a mask on. I doing well, Konohamaru. Just being the leader to my old home, you know, he answered. Konohamaru nodded in understanding. So tell me, what's it like being the Nanadem Hokage, Lord 7th, Naruto teased. It's so awesome, Naruto-Nisan, Konohamaru said cheerfully. The only thing I wish would change is this damn paperwork, he said exasperatedly. Hiruzen smiled at both of his grandsons. He was glad to have seen them build a brotherly bond. He was also glad to see that Naruto seemed to have been a great influence on him. Well, I know a great stress reliever, Naruto said with a smirk. Say, Konohamaru, how's Hanabi doing? He said slyly. Hanabi-chan is doing well, Lord 5th, Konohamaru teased back. She is doing a great job with the clan. She probably would give props to Neji for that. He helps her greatly with the council. Have you guys started working on children yet? You do have to rebuild your clan, you know, Naruto prodded. Aye. Konohamaru sputtered as he flushed red. You know, I can give a few tips myself. It's important that you know how to please your wife so the experience can be pleasurable to both parties, Naruto said nonchalantly as he pulled out a familiar orange book and began reading it. Konohamaru turned beet red. You still write those pervy books, sensei, he said accusingly. Everyone in the room sweat dropped at this while Kakashi giggled pervertedly as he nodded in agreement with future Naruto's statement. Hiruzen's eyes slightly lit up in excitement that his pseudo-grandson would continue the series. He becomes worse than you, Kakashi, Kurenai said as she sweat dropped. Kiba grinned at the blonde. Who would have thought the dead last would be able to snag 2 total babes? Your students' flames of youth shine brightly, Kakashi-san. Guy shouted. Huh? Did you say something, Guy? Kakashi responded with a hand to ear. Ah, curse you and your cool hip ways, Guy said, earning him a punch from Kurenai. A couple of adults snickered at him. The Hokage sighed. Let's just finish the scene, Hiruzen said as he rubbed his temples. And Hinata and Tamari don't have a problem with this? Konohamaru asked. Hina and Mari hold no qualms about what I write because they hold no qualms about what I do to them in bed. I never been one for hypocrisy. Naruto replied bluntly. Anyways, you know those are not the only books that I write. True, Konohamaru conceded. Speaking of said books, Hanabi wants a signed copy of Rene in person. No problem, Naruto replied. Hey, you guys want to have dinner tonight? It's on me, Konohamaru said with a grin. Naruto gave his student an eye smile. Sure, Konohamaru, I would like that. With that the scene ended. The screen flicked away out of existence and reverted back to the ceiling matrix. Some of the genin had blushes on their face while Hinata had fainted again, causing Kurenai to shake her head again. She wondered what her daughter figure was thinking as she blushed red and giggled in her unconscious state. Kurenai used a water jutsu this time to wake her up. Hiashi was fuming. He went up to Naruto and grabbed him by his collar. Naruto started sweating bullets as the man in front of him grabbed him by his collar. He could feel his hateful, piercing gaze as he looked into his eyes. You, keep your grubby little fingers off of my daughter. Hiashi growled. Hey, put me, Naruto struggled against his grip. I will never allow her to marry the likes of you, he said, yelling in his face. For a quick second, Hiashi saw Naruto narrow his eyes at him before returning back to a look of fear. It made him do a double take for a second before reverting back to his anger. That's enough, Hiashi. Put the boy down. Here is an ordered. Hiashi reluctantly dropped the boy on the floor, causing him to land on his bottom as he walked back to where he was standing. Naruto let out an oof as he hit the floor. He stood up and rubbed his bottom as his grandfather checked if he was okay. Are you okay, Naruto-kun? Hiruzen asked concernedly. I'm fine, old man, Naruto said as he walked back to his seat and plopped back down between his teammates. The future is weird, he said as he scratched his head idiotically. Indeed it is, Shino said, finally speaking for the first time. Who's next? Hiruzen asked. I am. Sakura yelled excitedly as she jumped up and went towards the seal that shows her future. Maybe I'll see if I end up with Sasuke-kun. Sakura stood on the ceiling matrix and clasped her hands together. She sent a pulse of chakra to her feet and the seals began to glow blue before the wall became a screen once again. This time it presented a different screen. It was a cool night in Konoha and everyone was sleeping soundly. Everyone except two ninja. One was a pink-haired girl with long hair. She had emerald green eyes and was wearing red garbs with short black shorts and ninja sandals. Far ahead of her was a boy with a white long-sleeve undershirt with a black shirt on. He wore black shorts and had raven black hair styled like a duck butt. He was carrying a backpack and currently making his way to the edge of the village. Looks like a slightly older Sakura and Sasuke. Kiba commented. Why is he running towards the outskirts of the village? Ino asked. Kakashi sighed. I guess I wasn't able to get to him, he thought as he continued to watch the scene. Sasuke looked at the scene with interest, wondering the same thing. The two ninja continued to leap and hop from building under the guise of night, one trying to catch the other. The raven hair male finally made it to the ground and began to make his way to the woods, not too far from the academy. The pink-haired girl landed as well, trying to catch up the boy. When she was a minimum distance from him, she called his name. Sasuke. The girl cried out as she huffed and puffed. The raven-haired boy stopped in his tracks and turned to face the pinkette. The girl stopped once she caught up with the boy. They stared at each other for a moment before the shinobi spoke. What do you want? Sasuke said. Where are you going, Sasuke-kun? Sakura asked. I have to leave. I have to get stronger. Sasuke said as he clenched his fists. You can't leave, Sasuke. This village. It needs you. I need you. Sakura said, saying the last part softly. What do you care? Sasuke said, turning away from her. Because I love you, Sasuke-kun, she yelled. Sasuke looked over his shoulder with his Sharingan activated. I don't need your love. Sasuke yelled. I need power. My clan will be avenged and he will die by my hands. He said as he began to walk away from her. Sasuke. Sakura said as tears began to flow from her eyes. She then felt herself be jabbed in the neck and put to sleep. Sasuke laid her on a bench as he looked at her with emotionless eyes. I'm sorry, Sakura, he said as he disappeared into the forest, never to be seen again. Wow. That was intense, Kiba commented. Yeah, Ino said thoughtfully. Sasuke said nothing. Before anyone could say anything else, the scene changed again. 16-year-old Sakura was at the hospital standing in front of a big fish. She took a deep breath and green chakra began to emit from her hands. The fish sat on top of a seal as her hands continued to emit green chakra. She then put her hands on the fish as if she was pushing the green chakra into the fish. Medical ninjutsu? Kakashi said, surprised. Anyo, what's that? Naruto said, feigning ignorance. Some of the genin rolled their eyes at his ignorance. Iryo ninjutsu is branch of ninjutsu associated with healing. It also known as the medic arts. It requires advanced chakra control as well as extensive knowledge in things such as herbs, medicines, anatomy and even poisons. Rock Lee informed. What? Naruto responded, scratching his head as he squinched his eyes. Everyone face vaulted at the blonde. A tick mark formed on Sakura's forehead. Baka! Sakura yelled as she punched Naruto on the head. Naruto fell out over his chair with stars circling over his head and his tongue and a dizzy expression on his face. Kakashi sweat dropped at his students. Troublesome, Shikamaru said as he looked at the hopeless blonde. Sakura was in deep concentration as she gritted her teeth and kept her hands still. Her body trembled a little as light sweat began to form on the side of her face. After a couple of minutes of concentration, the fish began to move and soon flop around. Forgetting her tiredness, Sakura cheered as she finally finished her master's final step to chakra control. She wiped the sweat of her brow when the door opened to the room. She turned around to be met with a platinum blonde girl the same age as her. Hey billboard brow, the blonde greeted. Ino pig, Sakura greeted as she turned around to face her friend. Guess who's back? Ino said. Sakura's eyes widened. You mean, she started. Yep, Naruto's back, Ino replied. Sakura walked to the area where she had her things and began to pack them as Ino wondered aimlessly. So where is Hinata? I'm sure she would love to see him. Sakura said with a smirk. When I last spoke to her, she said she was going into the forest to grab some herbs for Shizune. Ino said. You know Hinata's been progressing quite well in our master's teachings. Although doesn't have your strength, in all other things, she's almost at your level, if not higher. She prodded. Sakura ignored her friend and began to gather her belongings. She knew Ino was just trying to get under her skin. Though she had to admit, Hinata was well ahead in the game. She would constantly train herself just so she could keep up with the shy brunette. She had to admit that she was slightly jealous of her. Hinata's chakra control was better than hers and she could rival her in the knowledge department. She shook away those thoughts and continued to pack as Ino started gossiping about Kami knows what. Sakura began to pack her things as Ino looked around aimlessly. Once all her things are packed and the room was back to how it formerly was, she walked towards the door. Leaving together, both her and Ino walked out of the room and made their way outside. When they made outside, they were shocked to find that most of the village was covered with orange paint. The Hokage monument was defaced again and all they saw was a blonde blur running through the village and black and green blurs following the blur of yellow. They heard someone shout Naruto's name. A tick mark formed on Sakura's head as she looked at the scene. That idiot, she yelled in anger. When I see him, he's going to get it, Shanaru, she said angrily in annoyance. Then the scene ended. Naruto grinned sheepishly as he scratched the back of his head. Sakura was glaring daggers into his head while Sasuke continued to brood. Kakashi once again sweat dropped at his team. Everyone else just shook their head at the blonde while the Hokage rubbed his temples. Hey, wasn't that at the same time Naruto ran into Hinata? Ino asked. No, I think that was a couple of hours before, Ten responded. It doesn't matter when it happened. The important theme of the story is that Naruto is an idiot. Kiba replied. I swear I will pummel you into the ground if you do any of that in the future, Shanaru. She yelled at said blonde. But Sakura-chan, I didn't do anything, he said as he cried anime tears. Quiet you guys, the screen is coming back on, Choji said as he continued to munch on yet another bag of chips. A much older Sakura was in a rather large kitchen preparing dinner. She wore a form-fitting sleeveless crimson kimono dress hugged her body and stopped just below her knees. Thrown over it was an apron, hinting at domestic work. She stood at a respectable height of 5 feet 7 inches and she had chin-length pink hair that swayed with her movements as she bent over to take a pan out of the oven. The last identifiable feature of the woman was the violet diamond mark in the middle of her forehead. Wow, billboard brow. You grew up pretty nicely, Ino complimented her best friend turned love rival. But you still have that massive forehead. A large tick mark bulged on the pinkette's heat at Ino's backhanded compliment. Shut it, Ino pig, she yelled at the platinum blonde. Well, that's interesting, Kurenai remarked at the sight of the mark on Sakura's forehead. What is it, Kurenai-sensei? Asked the shy Hyuga heiress, barely being able to utter the question. She means the mark on her forehead, the third answered for the heiress, it's called the strength of 100 seal. It is an incredibly powerful technique that can only be done by persons with perfect chakra control. In fact, the only person who has this mark is my student, Tsunade, one of the Sanin. Most of everyone's jaws went on the floor. Sakura, the raging fangirl, had somehow replicated a technique known only to the strongest kunoichi. The future was not what it expected. First Naruto was the Azukage, which brought about many other questions, then Sakura is super strong. What's next? The 5 great villages form an alliance. I think it goes without saying that Sakura managed to become Tsunade-sama's apprentice sometime in the future, Kakashi commented with an eye smile. Your student's flames of youth shine as bright as the morning sun, Kakashi, my eternal rival. Guy yelled with fire in his eyes. She whistled a tune as she put her finishing touches on the pork roast. As she finished, a dark-haired girl stepped inside the kitchen. She had coarse black hair that was long and styled with a large bang swept to the left side. She wore red glasses over her coal eyes and a dress similar to her mother's, but her mother's had no noticeable design. Hers had a zipper that ran its length down the middle. The dress stopped mid-thigh to reveal black shorts. Knee-length socks led to kunoichi issue sandals. The girl looked around 15 or 16 years old. I'm done setting the table, mother. The raven-haired girl said. Sakura turned to her daughter and gave her a cute smile. Thank you, Sarada, she replied. Anyo, where's your brother? She asked. Probably near the lake in the backyard training. You know he's trying for the Rookie of the Year title at the academy. Sarada responded. Sakura laughed heartily at that. He truly is your father's son, she said. Sasuke had frozen when Sarada had entered the picture. The reason being, the girl looked like an Uchiha. The facial structure might have been reminiscent of his pink-haired teammate, but those eyes and hair were undoubtedly that of an Uchiha. But that couldn't be. The only way that girl was an Uchiha was if he was the father. And if he was the father, then the mother was. Oh sweet tomatoes on a pocky stick, this can't be happening. Sasuke thought disbelievingly. Kakashi looked at the Ravenhead rather amused by the situation. Yes, Sakura shouted in victory. I marry Sasuke-kun, she said gleefully, not noticing the seething fury of one Yamanaka. No you don't, Ino yelled angrily. Yes I do, Sakura retorted, before she wiggled her brows, and so does Sasuke-kun . She joked while poking fun at her rival. Yep, she was going to brag. What's so good about Sasuke, when you got someone better like me? Naruto said boastfully as he puffed his chest out. People throughout the room either face faulted, sweat dropped, or straight out laughed at what the blonde genin. Hiruzen rubbed his temples for the 3rd time that day. A tick mark formed on both Ino's and Sakura's head as Sakura punched Naruto to the floor while some people winced at the impact of the punch. Naruto got up and rubbed his head as Sakura began to yell at him. Baka, you're nothing compared Sasuke-kun nor will you ever be. You will never measure up to him. Who do you think you are? She yelled angrily. I can't believe you said that, Naruto. I'm pretty sure your dead last status would say otherwise. Kiba said in between laughs. Whatever, Naruto said with a pout as he turned back to look at the screen. As Sakura and Sarada walked out the kitchen and into the dining room, on their garbs revealed the Uchiha clan crest on their backs. As they set the table in the Uchiha compound, they heard the faint sound of the front gate being opened and footsteps making their way to the house. When the footsteps got closer to the door and the door opened, it revealed another raven head with bangs that covered the left side of his face. He stood at 5 feet 11 and a half, and wore black ninja pants, dark blue shinobi sandals, and a black cape-like cloak. There was sword attached to the holder that slung over his shoulder. His onyx black eyes looked around the living room before heading towards the dining area. When he got there, he was greeted by his wife and firstborn child finishing setting the table. Welcome home father, Sarada said with a bright smile as she ran and hugged her father. He smiled and hugged her back. "Hello Sasuke-kun." Her mother smiled as she walked over to the duo. Sarada pulled away from her father and went back to the kitchen to grab the rest of the food from out of the kitchen. Sakura went up to her husband and gave him a peck on the lips before pulling away from him and giving him a small smile. "You're just in time for dinner," Sakura said as she removed his cloak from her persons. While she went and hung his cloak on the coat rack, Sasuke went to the table and took his seat. He removed his sword and hung it on the side of the chair. A couple of seconds later, a black blur ran into his father, knocking him out of the chair. Sasuke hit the floor with an "oof." When he looked up, he saw a pair of green eyes looking at him with a smile. He wore a necklace with the Uchiha clan crest as a pendant and had raven black hair like his father and sister. He had a mixture of both his mother's and father's features. Sarada shook her head at the scene as she exited out of the kitchen with the last dish and placed on the table. She took her seat as her mother re-entered the dining room. She giggled at the scene as both her husband and son stood up. Once everyone took a seat at the table, they all dug into their dinner. Deciding to start up conversation, Sakura spoke to her husband. "So how was the council meeting today?" Sakura asked as she ate her food. "It was boring as usual. Just some clan business and overviews of the ninja program and market districts. I don't know why Itachi left me with so much paperwork," Sasuke said with a groan. Sakura chuckled at that. "Well, if I were Hokage for several years, I wouldn't want to see another sheet of paper either." She replied. "Itachi?" Sasuke said in shock. The Hokage as well as other adults in the room looked in at the screen in shock as well. Sasuke clenched his fist and released a low ground. "How in the hell does a traitor become Hokage of this village?" he said angrily. Kakashi put a hand on his shoulder, in attempt to calm him down. "Calm down, Sasuke. Let's just watch and see what happens next. I'm sure there has to be some explanation," Kakashi reasoned. Sasuke reluctantly nodded at his sensei as he turned his attention back on the screen. Sasuke gave her a small smile. "True," he responded. "Although, I do think he is using this vacation to work on other clan affairs. I mean, he left Sayuri and Kimiko with a babysitter for a week. I can only think of one reason why he would do that," he said with a smirk. "Well, rebuilding a clan is a lot of work," Sakura said. "Ew. Please don't talk about that stuff at the table," Sarada commented with a disgusted frown. "I'm trying to eat." "How was your day, Sarada?" Sakura asked. "Today was good. Me, Shikadai, and Mitsuki hung out today. Tomorrow my team and I have a mission to the water country," Sarada said. "What about you, Daisuke? Are you ready for the Genin exams tomorrow?" Sakura asked. "Of course, I am, Mom. I am an Uchiha. I have a reputation to look up to," Daisuke said with a grin. "Hey Dad, guess what?" Sasuke turned to his son, motioning him to continue. "I finally mastered that fire jutsu you taught me." "Oh?" he replied. Daisuke nodded his head gleefully. "Yep. Uncle Itachi was helping me with it before he left for his trip with Asami Obasan," Daisuke replied. Sasuke smiled at his youngest and ruffled his hair. "Well, maybe you can show me sometime after dinner," he said suggestively. His son grinned at him as he gave him a thumbs up. "Hi," he replied before resuming his meal. Sasuke smiled at how much his son acted like him when he was a child. Before the massacre, of course. Sakura looked at the interaction between their son and Sasuke and smiled brightly. They began to talk about the rest of their day and how it went. They laughed at some of the stories that Daisuke said that happened at the academy and listened to Sarada as she talked about their missions. She could tell she had a little thing for a certain Nara, but didn't comment on it, not knowing how Sasuke would react about his daughter having a crush. The Uchiha family happily ate dinner until everything was done. A small smile was etched on Sasuke's face as he made it to their bedroom. When the scene ended, Naruto was the first one to speak. "Wow. I've never seen Sasuke smile before," Naruto said as he scratched the back of his head with an idiotic expression. "Shut up, Dobi," Sasuke growled at the blonde as he glared daggers into the blonde's head. "You do seem really happy, Sasuke," Kakashi teased. Sasuke huffed and went back to his brooding ways. Some people's sweat dropped at this. Chibi Sakura and Mebuki was dancing for joy that she was wedded to an Uchiha. "Sue, who's next?" Kiba asked. Ino was fuming. She couldn't believe what the screen had shown her. How was it possible that Forehead had won Sasuke over? She knew for a fact that she was way prettier out of the two, so why would he choose forehead over her? Perhaps the forehead girl had drugged her poor Sasuke-kun or trapped him in some type of genjutsu. Must be it, Ino thought as she watched the current Sakura draw closer to the current Sasuke. Surprisingly enough, he didn't pull away or chastise her for her advances. Alright, that does it, Ino raged in her mind. Don't worry, Sasuke-kun. You beautiful Ino-chan will save from Billboard Brow. With her mission in mind, the blonde Yamanaka rushed to the ceiling matrix before flooding it with her chakra, smirking as the screen flashed to life. Just you wait, Sakura. Sasuke will be mine again, she thought as a scene from her future began to play. 'Tis the mind of a fangirl. Where the hell is he? An irate Ino roared at apparently no one. Everyone was mildly taken back from Ino's loud voice. A certain Nara muttered about blondes getting more troublesome in the future. There Ino stood wearing a collarless purple blouse that exposed her midriff, followed by an ankle-length skirt of the same color that somehow gave a seductive charm without exposing any skin. Some would say she was absolutely perfect with her light blue eyes and long, platinum blonde hair that almost reached her ankles. The resident Yamanaka was not the happiest person at the moment. Her beautiful face contorted to a fierce scowl. The female member of the Shika Ino Cho formation glared at apparently nothing, not noticing the big-boned man slowly inching his way away from her. The man was plump and stood proud at 5 feet 9 inches in height. He was dressed in red clothing with grey amour as he clenched his bag of chips and moved towards his male counterpart. Standing beside him with a lazy expression that said, "I don't want to be here," the figure sighed at his teammate's loud screech. He wore black shinobi pants that led to a plain black t-shirt, a look that screamed, "I'm too lazy to care." Reaching into the inside of his pocket of his cream jacket, he produced a single cigarette. "Look, it's future us," Ino squealed as she observed how their future counterparts were dressed. She had to say, she was quite pleased with apparel she would grow to wear. However, her father had other thoughts in how he felt about her clothing and was not hesitant to make it known. "Absolutely not," he practically screamed, "there is no way I would or will allow you leave the house dressed like that." "But Dad," Ino started irritatedly but was cut off by her overprotective Yamanaka head. "No buts. I don't know what in the hell my future self was thinking, but your mother and I completely disagree." "Right, honey?" he said as he turned to his wife for support. "I don't know, dear, I think she looks splendid," the woman commented innocently as she was secretly loving the betrayed expression on her husband's face. While she knew he had the best intentions, she also knew how Papa Bear could overreact in certain situations, especially when those situations concern their daughter. However, she does enjoy messing with him. Not that she would admit that out loud, though. "See, Mom agrees with me," Ino defended. "Plus, with me in that outfit, Sasuke-kun would surely come crawling back to me." She added in her mind. "You're still so troublesome," the smoker of the group drawled. "Just relax while there is nothing going on and it's peaceful. I'm pretty sure one of us will have little brats running around here soon. May as well enjoy the quiet while it lasts," the man tried to explain to the mind walker. Taking a long drag from the cigarette between his lips, the man was surprised when the cigarette was yanked away. Narrowing his eyes in irritation, the man was greeted with an annoyed scowl of the blonde kunoichi. "Damn troublesome blondes," Shikamaru muttered to himself as he sent her a glare. "How many times am I gonna tell you that you should stop smoking? I swear you're worse than Asuma-sensei." Ino lectured. "Speaking of Asuma-sensei, how is Mirai?" Choji asked as he munched on his chips. "Mirai, who's that?" Kurenai asked, secretly worried that Asuma was dating another woman before he died. Seeing where Kurenai's line of questioning was going, Kakashi reasoned that a bit of fun wouldn't hurt anyone, so he decided to antagonize the younger Sarutobi in the room. "Perhaps she's his lady friend, we may never know," Kakashi commented. Needless to say, Asuma was not amused with a certain silver-haired man trying to mess up his relationship with Kurenai. "She's doing fine," Shikamaru answered, drawing another cigarette from his coat. "She just made Chunin a while ago, so there is no doubt Kurenai and Asuma-sensei are proud of her. They took her out to celebrate not long ago." "And you didn't tell us?" Ino said with a tick mark forming on her forehead. "You didn't ask," Shikamaru replied nonchalantly as he took a draw of his cigarette. Ino snatched his second one out of his hand and put it out with her sandal. She had a smug look on her face while a tick mark formed on his forehead. "These damned troublesome blondes. Always messing with my day," he thought as he seethed. With a triumphant smirk, Ino spoke. "Of course, any father would be proud. I'm sure Lord Third would have been happy to see that in his grandchild." Ino said kind of sadly. "Yeah," Shikamaru and Choji said as they gave a small moment of silence for their former Hokage. "I'm a dad," Asuma exclaimed. The Junin-ranked Sarutobi was near the point of fainting at the moment. If he understood the conversation right, that would mean that the mother was no doubt. "Yosh, Asuma and Kurenai, both of you have shown us that your flames of youth will shine brightly. Come Lee, we must train so we too can match their flames of youth." The ever-exuberant Guy shouted, not noticing the red tint on both Junin's faces. "Yes, Guy-sensei. Lee, Guy-sensei. Lee, Guy-sensei. Lee, Guy-sensei." 10 sweat dropped at the scene while Neji rolled his eyes. "Idiots, the lot of them," the Hyuga thought to himself as they continued to watch the screen. "Speaking of Lord Third, how's our Nanadem?" Ino asked Shikamaru. "He's doing good, even though he took his passing kind of hard." Shikamaru answered, "I think Naruto's little pep talk pulled him out of his depression along with Itachi's checkups. He seems to work harder in honor of his grandfather and be one of the best Hokages he could be," he said with a small smile. Ino laughed. "Well, that's Konohamaru for you. Always resilient like his sensei." She replied, "Where's Naruto anyway? Isn't he supposed to be visiting for the festival?" Choji said. "Probably," the Nara said lazily. "Can you believe it's been 1 year since Hinata has had the twins? I still haven't seen them yet," Ino said. "Time sure does fly," Choji commented. "Well, I'm going to the hot springs," Shikamaru said as he got and stretched a little. Choji got up as well. "I'm coming with. Let me go get Sakura and Ten," Ino said as she ran off to go get the girls. Shikamaru sighed before walking towards the local hot springs. "Come on Choji, let's go before that troublesome woman comes back with her friends," he said as he walked off. Throwing his bag of chips away, Choji pulled out another bag and began to walk with his friend in silence as they walked to the hot spring. When the scene ended, Asuma looked at his father kind of sadly. Although he and his father had a kind of rough relationship, he still loved him dearly and had much respect for him. Naruto also looked kind of sad at the mention of Gigi's death. Despite of the anger and slight resentment he held on the inside for his pseudo-grandfather, he was still his Gigi. No one said anything before the next scene began to play. An older-looking Ino was walking down the halls of the academy with a small basket in her hand. She looked around 27 and her outfit slightly changed. She smiled and waved at teachers and students as she made her way through the academy. She finally stopped at a door that had the words, "Art Room," on the side of the door written in kanji. She peeked through the window and saw that class was still going. As she went to open the door, the school bell rung, signaling that it was time for lunch. As the students began to file out of the classroom, Ino walked in and smiled as she made her way to her husband. The man had short jet black hair and had translucent pale skin. He wore a dark gray and black jacket that exposed his midriff and black shinobi. He had a black-clothed forehead protector on his head and was currently at his desk looking at something. He had a longing look in his eyes as if he was reminiscing something. Ino placed the basket on the desk as she came behind her husband and gave him a hug. When the man looked up, he saw it was his wife and gave her what seemed like a fake smile, yet you could tell it was real and heartfelt. "Is that my husband?" Ino asked slowly as she put the pieces together. "It would seem so," Shino commented. "You sure got yourself a looker, Ino-chan." Her mother grinned happily as Ino lightly blushed. Ino did not know how to feel about the situation. She wanted Sasuke, but looking at herself with her future husband, she seemed genuinely happy. She also had to admit that although he was no Sasuke, he wasn't that bad to look at. "Good afternoon, beautiful," Sai said looking at his wife with his signature smile. "Hello, Sai-kun," Ino said happily as she gave him a peck on the lips. "I brought lunch for us and figured we could have lunch together." "Of course," Sai said as put the picture he was looking at to the side as he began to open the basket and pull out 2 bentos. Ino went and grabbed a chair. Once she pulled it up to his desk, she sat down and grabbed a bento. They both opened their bentos and began eating. "So where's Inojin?" Sai asked. "He's hanging out with Sarada," Ino answered. I'm supposed to be picking him up from the Uchiha compound later on. Well, give my greetings when you speak to Ugly later. Sai said. Kiba burst into a fit of laughter while Neji smirked at the nickname the man gave Sasuke. Sasuke clenched his fists and gritted his teeth in anger at the man on the screen. The adults shook their head while Hiruzen just chuckled. Anyo. What's wrong, Sakura-chan? Naruto said loudly. He looked nervous as dark clouds began to form over her head and her bangs shadowed her eyes. Did that pale-faced bastard just call me ugly? She roared with indignation. There was no way she would take that lying down, no siree. And inner Sakura was in complete agreement with her fists in the air. Blinking, Ino found herself in a fit of loud laughter when she realized that her husband had indeed called Sakura ugly. Blinking away the tears that formed throughout her laughter, Ino managed to say something in between laughs. It's no wonder I married him, the guy's a genius. And he isn't too bad on the eyes either. She stated, the topic of Sasuke at the back of her mind. Growling, Sakura decided to leave the man's punishment for later. No one insulted her or her future husband like that. I'll make sure he gets what's coming to him, Shanaru. Inner Sakura said in agreement. Ino laughed at her husband's nickname for their friends. I will, Ino said in between giggles. Sai gave her a smile before returning to eating his meal. He loved to hear her laughter and see her smile. He felt his heartbeat skip as he saw the joy and happiness in her eyes. As Ino ate, she grabbed the folder Sai was looking at when she got here. What's this? She asked curiously as she opened the folder. It's a drawing I was showing my class today, Sai answered. Ino gasped as she opened the folder and saw the drawing. Wow, was all she said when she looked at the picture. Look at the picture above. This picture is beautiful, Sai, Ino said as she admired the drawing. Is this Naruto? Hi, Sai answered. It's very good, Ino said as she closed the folder and placed it back where it was. One of your best drawings yet. She complimented as she continued to eat. I actually didn't draw it, Ino-chan. Sai replied. Ino-jin? Ino asked. Nope, Sai responded as he continued to eat. Now Ino was greatly confused. Then who drew it? Ino asked confusedly. Actually, Naruto-kun drew it himself. Sai said with a small smile. Naruto-kun? Ino said dumbfoundedly. Hi, Sai replied. You know Naruto? Ino asked dumbly. Of course, I've known Naruto for many years. Sai answered. How? Ino asked, now curious of how he knew the blonde. Well, Naruto was the one who snuck into the underground Anbu quarters and would bring me extra food when I was in the root program. He even saved my brother when Danzo pinned us against each other. Sai said kind of sadly. You have a brother? Ino said, surprised at the news. I had one, Sai corrected. He died 5 years ago from an unknown illness. I was hoping he would be back to see Inojin, but he didn't live that long unfortunately. I'm sorry to hear that, Sai. Ino said sadly. I wished you would have told me. Surprisingly, Sai smiled at it. It's okay, Ino-chan. I'm just glad he was given a chance to live in freedom like he always wanted. He said happily. Anyway, after Naruto faked my brother's death and helped him escape, I worked as a double agent for him a while, before Danzo's demise. Wow, was all Ino said. He gave me that drawing before he went on his 3-year training trip with Master Jiraiya. Sai explained. I was looking through my things last night and found it. I thought maybe I'd show it to my class today as way of inspiration. I felt that his picture captured the element of self-reflection, a vital piece in artistry. Ino sat in silence as she listened to her husband. She was trying to soak in all the information husband gave about the current Azukage. I guess I didn't know him as well as I thought I did. She thought to herself as she heard the school bell ring again, signaling that it was the end of lunch. Ino gathered their trash and threw it in the trash can before grabbing the basket. I guess I will be seeing later tonight, Sai-kun, she said upon her departure. Alright, beautiful, Sai with one his trademark smiles. Ino blushed prettily as she said her goodbyes to her husband and left the classroom as students began to enter the room and fill the empty desks. As she walked out of the building, she continued to think about what her husband had told her. Things didn't make sense. For as long as she knew Naruto, before he was a genin, he had been incapable of doing such things. Maybe she should talk to Sakura about it to get some insight. She was his teammate after all. When the scene ended, everyone blinked at the screen, trying to see if they had heard correctly. Naruto started to lightly sweat. On the inside, he was cursing his future friend for revealing such information. It was really blowing his cover. In his head, Kurama was laughing at the blonde's distress. After getting over his fit of laughter, Kurama actually felt a little sorry for his kid. He also knew the dangers of blowing his cover from both the village and those who would be after him. He could only hope that nothing else would be revealed. The room was silent as everyone turned to look at Naruto. The range of expressions on the face was of surprise to suspicion to confusion to complete shock. Naruto began to push his fingers together and put his head down, avoiding everyone's stare. "You can draw?" Sakura said dumbly. Naruto nodded his head slightly. "What is root?" Kiba asked both the Hokage and the blonde. "Something that will not be discussed," the third said firmly as he looked at his pseudo-grandson suspiciously. The Hokage and former Anbu Chunin looked at the blonde genin, wondering how would he know about root Anbu and Danzo. Most importantly, how did he manage to break into the organization and how did he have someone working for him on the inside? One thing that everyone could agree on was that something was up and Naruto was hiding something. "Naruto," Kakashi started, but was interrupted by said genin. "Can someone else please go, Gigi?" Naruto said, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Deciding it was best to hold the discussion for later, the Hokage nodded. "Who would like to go next?" Hokage asked, ending any type of questioning anyone had for the blonde. After a couple moments of silence, the meek Hyuga girl stepped forward, surprising some of the occupants in the room. "Are you sure, Hinata?" Kurenai asked her student and pseudo-ward. Honestly, she hadn't thought the girl would have spoken up to see her future, having already assumed the Hinata would have faded into background until she was the only one left. Although, when she saw the girl cast a glance to the apparent Azukage to be, a coy grin slipped onto her face. Something Hiashi also noticed, but decided to hold his tongue. For now, at least. Naruto and Kurama noticed it too and mentally smirked. Kurama gave his tenant a foxy grin and wiggled his eyes at his kit, causing said person to blush a little. The Hokage saw his grandson's slight blush, raised his eyebrow at him. Shino did the same as he observed both his teammate and comrade. "Hi, Kurenai-sensei," the slight introvert responded before leaving her seat wedged between her two male partners. Standing atop the ceiling matrix, the girl twiddling her thumbs before with a single hand seal, she concentrated and channeled her chakra to her feet. "This is it," Hinata thought as the screen began to pop on the scene played. Naruto and Hinata was currently walking through the village as they made their way to dinner. The two ninja looked like they around 16 in age and were currently walking through the market district on their way to a specific restaurant Naruto had in mind to take her. Hinata was wearing a white dress with an lavender jacket and simple pair of sandals. Her indigo hair was a bit longer as well as her bangs, and she looked nervous as she walked beside her longtime crush. Naruto wore his regular shinobi jumpsuit with the black and orange jacket and pants with black ninja sandals. He still wore his forehead protector on his head and his hair was still spiky, however, he had two bangs that framed the side of his face. The endings of his bangs were red. A.N. Just fill in the blanks in the picture. They each stole glances at each other as they continued to walk down the street. Neither person saying anything to the other. On the outside, Naruto may have looked relaxed, but on the inside, he was a nervous wreck. This was the first time he had taken the girl to dinner and he was kinda nervous and afraid of the outcome. Deciding to start up conversation, Naruto cleared his throat, catching Hinata's attention. "I appreciate you accepting my offer to dinner, Hinata." Naruto spoke. "It's nothing, Naruto-kun. Why you didn't have to go this far to thank me?" Hinata replied. "Of course, I had to," he said, giving her a charming smile that made her blush and look down. "Not many would help me the way you did, Hinata. You are a very sweet girl," he said genuinely. Hinata nodded and there was silence once again. And once again Naruto broke the silence. "You look beautiful, tonight." Naruto complimented honestly. This caused Hinata to blush again. "Thank you, Naruto-kun," she stuttered. Naruto grinned at her as they continued to make their way to their destination. "Looks like it picked up from Naruto's story when he defaced the Hokage monument," Shikamaru concluded. Again, he added, "Who knew Naruto could be such a flirt?" Ino teased the blonde as he looked away with a slight blush to the amusement of Hiruzen and Kakashi. Hinata gasped at the place he brought her when they arrived at their destination. They were at Kazekage, the fire palace. It was one of the most expensive restaurants in Konoha, and not many ninja could afford to eat here on their salary. From her understanding, it was one of the places that was brought here 4 years ago, and it instantly grew in popularity. Naruto took her hand and escorted her into the building. When they entered into the restaurant, they were instantly greeted by the host, and he highlighted the previous made reservation, much to Hinata's surprise. Once they were seated by the host, both Naruto sat at the booth and looked over the menu. "Order anything you want, Hinata-chan," Naruto said energetically. "It's on me." "Are you sure, Naruto-kun?" Hinata asked hesitantly. She looked at the prices of the meals and they were quite expensive. She didn't want Naruto to waste all his money on her. "I'm positive," he said, giving her a foxy grin. At that moment, the waiter came and took their order. They both ordered teas to drink. For dinner, Naruto ordered the chef's special, to the surprise of Hinata. It was the most expensive thing on the menu. Hinata settled for fish and a salad. Once the waiter was done taking their order, Naruto turned back to Hinata to find her staring at him. When she saw she was caught looking at him, she diverted her eyes from him and looked elsewhere. "Yuk no I would have been fine with someplace else like Ichiraku's, Naruto-kun. You didn't have to bring me here." Hinata replied. "I know, but you deserve to dine at only the best, Hime." Naruto said. "I mean, you are practically the princess of Hyuga clan, right?" he said as he scratched the back of his head sheepishly. Hinata blushed at the nickname he gave her. "Why yeah, but not at your expense," she responded. "Don't worry about my expense, Hinata," Naruto said with a wave of his hand. "Just allow me to treat you tonight. Don't worry about anything else." Hinata was about to protest, but the stern look Naruto gave her said that there was no room for argument. After a couple of moments of silence, Hinata spoke. "Naruto-kun?" Hinata asked. "Yes?" Naruto answered, giving her his undivided attention. Is this a date?" she asked shyly. "Sure, it can be if you want to be," Naruto said slyly. Hinata blushed at this. It was too good to be true. Calming herself down, she closed her eyes, tugging on her jacket as if she was clinging onto it for dear life. Naruto looked at her with concern. Before he could voice it, Hinata spoke. "What is this, Naruto?" Hinata asked with her eyes still closed. "What do you mean?" Naruto asked curiously. "You've never shown interest in me, Naruto. Not once did you ever look my direction or shown any signs of you liking me in that way," Hinata said without a stutter. "You've always chased after Sakura and asked her out. I'm not just some rebound girl, you know. I know you are in love with her. Just please don't play with my emotions, Naruto, and use me as someone else to occupy your time until you get the girl you want," Hinata said as she wiped a few tears that was falling from her eyes. She stood up from the booth and was about to walk away until Naruto called out to her. "Hinata?" Naruto called out. Hinata turned around to look at the blonde, only be met with an emotionless face, which slightly shocked her. "Sit," he said with authority. Hinata subconsciously complied to the command. She sat down and put her head down, not looking at Naruto. "Look at me," Naruto said sternly. Hinata looked up to find him gazing at her intensely. She shifted a little uncomfortable under such a gaze. Naruto looked at the brunette for a long time before speaking. "First, don't you ever accuse me of using or toying with you. It is not within my character to do so, and I don't appreciate attacks against my character. Secondly, yes, this is a date and I brought you here not only because I wanted to, but because I felt that you deserved it. I am very steadfast in my debts, and whether you like it or not, I am indebted to your kindness. I was serious in what I said earlier. Not many people would have done that for me." Naruto spoke. Hinata was silent. She actually felt kind of bad for those accusations earlier. Before she could apologize, Naruto spoke again. "I am not upset at what you said. You were completely right in feeling the way you felt earlier. What you said about the relationship scene between Sakura and I is true. However, I have a secret I must tell you," Naruto said. "What is it?" Hinata asked curiously, with a hint of shyness. "I never liked Sakura," Naruto admitted. "What?" Some of the genin yelled at Naruto's admittance, with Sakura being the loudest. They all looked at Naruto disbelievingly. This is the same blonde who asked the pink-haired Kunoichi out every single day and wasn't afraid to declare his love for her. This is also the same blonde who followed her everywhere she went, wanting to go on a date. Even the Hokage was shocked at the revelation. They could have sworn he was head over heels for the girl. Naruto avoided their stares and just looked at the screen. I always knew she didn't like me, nor would she ever. Naruto added. But why did you continue to pursue her? Hinata asked, surprised by his admittance. It's complicated, Hinata. Naruto said with a sigh. There are some things that are too troublesome for its own good. You know, there is this girl that I've had my eyes on for quite some time. Naruto mentioned slyly. I met her when we first started at the academy. She was being bullied by 3 upperclassmen who were picking at her eyes. Hinata's eyes widened as he continued his story. When I arrived to the scene, I jumped in between the 3 older boys and the girl to defend her. I remember when I tried fighting, I was beat into a bloody pulp and even had my scarf ruined. He said with a chuckle. After the 3 boys left, the girl came up to me and asked if I were okay. When I looked upon the face of the girl I had just taken a beating for, the pain that I felt before vanished as I met her eyes. She was an angel. She had beautiful pupil-less lavender eyes that shone like the brightest moon and porcelain skin that stood out amongst the snow. At that moment, every single punch and kick I endured was worth it. Naruto said nostalgically. Tears fell from her eyes as he continued. The girl helped me up and gave me a smile. She blushed cutely, too. Naruto smiled as he reminisced the moment. I was about to ask her her name when Guardian began to call for her. Saying goodbye, I left and headed toward class. Who knew it would be in the same class as the indigo-haired beauty I had saved not long ago? He said with a grin. So you remembered, Hinata said as she wiped the tears from her eyes. Of course, I remembered a beautiful being such as yourself. Naruto replied. It's not every day you meet a gorgeous damsel in distress. I have to be honest, Hinata, I was very well smitten with you when I first laid eyes on you. I just needed a name with the face. He said charmingly. Hinata fought hard to push down her blush as he showered her with compliments. Getting her composure, Hinata asked the Naruto the question that she had been wanting to ask the blonde since she was aware of his memory of their first encounter. Why didn't you tell me? Hinata said out of the blue. Excuse me? Naruto said, not hearing her clearly. Why didn't you tell me your feelings for me? Hinata asked more clearly. Naruto sighed and closed his eyes. He brought his together underneath his chin. Hinata watched the blonde intently as she waited for his answer. After a couple of seconds, Naruto exhaled loudly before unlocking his fingers and resting his arms to the table. He opened his eyes and looked directly into hers. He looked at her with a look that she had never seen in his eyes before. There were so many emotions running through his cerulean blue eyes that she could pick which was more dominant. To be honest, Naruto started, I didn't reveal my feelings to you because of who you were. What do you mean who I was? Hinata asked confusedly. Hinata. You are the heiress of the Hyuga clan, one of Konoha's most prominent and founding clans. I am a clanless orphan and dead last of the academy. Not only that, but I am also a troublemaker and a known failure. Naruto stated. You are a Hyuga, an elite in this society, and as such you have a reputation to uphold. By societal nature, you are not supposed to associate yourself with the likes of street peasants such as myself. Everyone was shocked at Naruto's words. Some of the adults pitied the blonde genin while the Hokage looked down sadly at how the future Naruto viewed himself. You really think I care about that, Naruto? Hinata said angrily. She didn't like how he was degrading himself as well as putting her on a high pedestal. Before she could continue her rant, Naruto silenced with a raise of his hand. Let me finish, he said sternly. Hinata complied even though she was lightly grumbling under her breath. Naruto found the sight slightly amusing, however, he had to finish his explanation to get her to understand. Do not misunderstand me, Hinata-chan. I do not fancy such ideals and concepts like the elitism your clan as well as others carry. He explains. However, this type of mentality plays a large role in politics. You must understand, Hinata. Because of your position, it would be poorly looked upon by many if you were to have such relations with me. It would have stained your reputation, and you and me both know how significant a reputation plays in politics, especially clan politics. He continued, I am aware of the structure of your clan, Hinata. The council as well as the elders don't think too highly of me for more reasons other than the ones you think. At that time, I knew that if I would have pursued a relationship with you, it would cause you even more problems at home. I know what the cage bird seal is, Hinata, and wasn't going to let that happen to you, nor was I going to give your father even more reason to punish you the way he did. Naruto said. You also saw how the villagers treated me. Naruto replied. I refused to allow you to fall victim to their hatred and misunderstandings. That is why I could not tell you at that time. Whether you want to admit or not, you are quite stubborn, Hinata, and you would not have stayed away from me if I asked you to. I preferred to secretly follow me rather openly hang out with me and get hurt. Know that I would do anything to protect those I love, Hinata Hyuga. You are very precious to me, he said with a small smile as he reached across the table and took her hand. The occupants in the room once again stared at the blonde in shock, especially Hiashi Hyuga and Neji Hyuga. The occupants in the room started to feel rather bad about the genin. What else have you been hiding, Naruto? Many thought as they looked at the blonde who refused to look them in the eye. Naruto, Hinata said sadly. She was going through so many emotions. She was relieved that he liked her back. She was shocked at his admittance and even remembrance of when he had saved her. She also felt sad that he felt he couldn't openly be with her. She knew it was true what he said about her and what they would do to her if the look on her father's face didn't prove. He had basically read them like a book. Hiashi turned to the blonde with an emotionless face. He honestly didn't really know what to think of the boy. He obviously a lot more than he let on. He looked at the blonde who refused to look him in the eye. How do you know of that seal, Uzumaki? Hiashi asked the blonde. Naruto said nothing. He didn't even spare the Hyuga clan head a glance. Getting frustrated at his silence, Hiashi was about to demand an answer when Hiruzen raised his hand to silence the Hyuga clan head. Hiruzen took one look at Naruto before turning back to the screen. You what? Hinata stuttered as her teary eyes looked into Naruto's cerulean blues. Naruto blushed and cleared his throat. I said I love you. He said. He looked back into her lavender ones. New tears began to flow from Hinata's face, but these were tears of joy. I love you, too, Naruto. Hinata replied back. Naruto smiled brightly at her response. Hinata wiped the tears as she took Naruto's hand. She had to admit, she could not refute none of Naruto's points pertaining her clan. Her heart swelled as she looked into his eyes. All she saw was love and devotion. She was so happy and relieved that her longtime crush had reciprocated her feelings. Dare she say, feelings that were any deeper than her own. After a couple of moments of silence, Hinata finally spoke. So why now? Hinata asked. She saw his cerulean blue eyes gleam with mischief as he grinned at her. Let's just say I got few tricks up my sleeve, he said with a foxy grin. Hinata shook her head at the blonde's antics. Oh Naruto-kun. What? I'm the #1 prankster king. I got a reputation to uphold. Naruto exclaimed dramatically. Besides, I'm as sly as a fox by nature and not just because of the whiskers either. He said wittingly. So I guess you wouldn't mind calling you Foxy-chan, would you? Hinata teased. Naruto turned beet red and laughed nervously. Anyo. I would prefer if you not call me that in public, Hina-chan. Hinata laughed at his embarrassment, which caused the blonde to flush more. Inwardly, Naruto loved to see her laugh. It made his heart flutter at how she looked beautiful anyway, anywhere, or in anything that she is wearing. As they conversed and laughed with each other, the waiter had brought out their orders and laid the ticket on the table where they could pay for their meal after they were finished. As they were finishing their meals, Hinata just looked at Naruto as he ate the last bit of his food. She wondered how he ate so much and still maintained his weight. Maybe it was because he was always running around somewhere. After all, he was quite hyperactive. She also noticed that Naruto was a very intricate person. You wouldn't understand him unless he wanted you to. Naruto-kun? Hinata called out. Yes, Haim? Naruto answered as he took the last bite of his food. Why do you hide yourself? Hinata asked curiously. The world is satisfied with words and pictures, but few care to dive beneath the surface. Naruto started. When people see me, they see an idiot, knucklehead ninja who is always getting into trouble and never gives up. They also see, as you say, a proud failure. Quote, however, very few actually try to understand me or understand why I act the way that I acted. Because that is how they saw me, that is the Naruto that I gave them. He explained. You have to understand that there are two types of curiosity, a momentary and a permanent. Momentary curiosity is concerned with surface appearance of things. However, permanent curiosity is attracted by the amazing and consecutive life that flows beneath the surface of things. Like in your case, when you saw me Hinata, you saw a gem enveloped in a case of rock where others saw a plain stone. It's because you see me as more than what everyone else sees that layers of my persons begin to unravel. Naruto admitted, "It's funny how even my sensei preached about looking underneath the underneath, yet sees me the same way as everyone else does." He said with a chuckle. "I guess I understand," Hinata replied, "but doesn't that make you lonely?" "Nope," Naruto said, popping the pea. "I have precious people in my life that I can lean on. You're one of them, Hina-chan. I live the way I live because I want to see how others view and feel about me. Not about my skills or what they think I can do." Perception is a very complex concept. It is the deception of the perception that makes things tricky. Naruto commented shrewdly. Hinata had to take some time to think about what he just said. The boy in front of her was simply more observant and astute than what many give him credit for. After they continued to talk for a little while longer, Naruto paid for the food and escorted Hinata back home. He left her with a kiss on the cheek and went on his merry way as she watched him from a distance with a light blush on her face. She went to bed that night with a smile on her face, thanking Kami that her dreams came true. When the scene ended, everyone once again was stunned into silence. Hinata fought the urge to just run over there and hug the blonde. She was so happy that her dream had came true and relieved that his infatuation with a certain pink-haired girl was nothing more than a hoax, although she still didn't know exactly why he faked it. The future Naruto spoke in riddles and wise words when he answered her future self's question. "So I was correct. You are a lot more than you let on, Uzumaki-san." Shino spoke surprisingly, breaking the silence. "No shit," Sume commented as she looked around the room to see others nodding in agreement with Shino's statement. "What are you trying to hide, Dobi?" Sasuke prodded as he looked at the blonde that was avoiding any eye contact. "Yeah, why you being so suspenseful, baka? Trying to be cool like Sasuke-kun?" Sakura accused. Naruto turned to his team sharply and gave them a cold stare. It shocked everyone when he turned to look at them with such an icy gaze. There was no hint of innocence within them. His now steel cobalt eyes was now scanning all the occupants in the room, looking them right in the eye. Ino and Sakura could feel themselves shiver as his eyes chillingly scanned them. He stopped his inspection when they landed on the Hokage. Hiruzen saw the blonde nod to him, silently letting him know that he would talk to him later. The Hokage reluctantly agreed and nodded back. "Let's continue to watch the story. I am sure some of your questions will be answered, hopefully." Lord Third said, muttering that last part. Before anyone could protest or object, the scene on the screen began to change. Like a video clip, it began to play. A much older Hinata could currently be found in the Hyuga compound near her father's office. She had just gotten home and learned from one of the Hyuga guards that Naruto had come into the house requesting an audience. Curious to what Naruto wanted to talk to my father about, she put her up to the door and masked her chakra so no one could sense or hear her. She looked around 17, almost 18 years old, and she had her hair in a high ponytail with her bangs framing her face. She had a flower on the side of her hair and wore a white yukata with red trimmings. Ask any man and they would agree that she was a beautiful woman indeed. Her face contorted in concentration as she tried to listen in to what her father and boyfriend were discussing. She cursed at the silencing seals her father placed on the office. In the office, Hiyashi Hyuga sat behind the desk in his traditional Hyuga yukata, staring at the young Jinchuriki before him. He stared at the young blonde without expression. He wondered what the boy was doing here, although he had an inkling on what it was. Said blonde was staring right back at the Hyuga with the same stoic expression. He looked directly into his Byakugan eyes and stared into them without fear and without a flinch. He had cut his short and had worn a traditional kimono. He had on a black kimono with a black haori coat with his clan's insignia on the sides of his coat in white. He wore a white haori himo with a dark gray hakama. On his feet were black tabi socks and zori. He was clean-shaven and looked presentable. "You clean up well, Naruto," Ino commented offhandedly. "Why does he have same symbol that's on the back of the Chunin and Chunin jackets on the as insignias on his haori?" 1010 asked. "Perhaps we should continue to watch and get our answer," Shino said, having a feeling of the reasons why. However, Hiruzen's eyes widened at the sight of the Uzumaki clan symbol on the man's jacket. He looked at Naruto and saw that he wasn't fazed on bit by it. Maybe he already knows, Hiruzen thought as he looked at the blonde. He rubbed his temples at the thought of his grandson already knowing his heritage. They continued to stare at each other in silence, the tension in the room thick enough to slice with a butter knife. After a couple of minutes of their chilly stare-off, Hiashi was the first to speak, breaking the cold silence. "Why have you abruptly requested an audience with me, Uzumaki?" Hiashi said coldly. Not fazed by his attitude, Naruto cleared his throat and spoke. "I am here to request your daughter's hand in marriage." Naruto answered, straight to the point. Hiashi narrowed his eyes at the boy. The last time they had a conversation like this was last year when he asked for permission to court his daughter. Of course, his response was no. However, he knew Hinata would sneak out of the compound to see the young Jinchuriki. No matter how many times he tried to stop it, it would never work. He kept silent about it after a couple of weeks, not wanting the Hyuga Council to catch air of it. Any rumors of Hinata and Naruto dating was silenced by the clan head, denying every claim and accusation. "Now why would I allow someone like you to wed my daughter?" Hiashi asked, slightly glaring at the blonde. "Listen, Hyuga-sama, I am aware of yours and the council's dislike of me. That was obvious when you denied my request to court your daughter." Naruto replied, "A deny that you clearly ignored," Hiashi said sharply. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the clan head. "You misunderstand, Hyuga-sama. I was not asking for Hinata's hand. I was requesting. The only reason I am here against my better judgment is to do the proper and honorable thing to do and present myself to the father of the woman I wish to become my bride. Do know that whether you accept or deny my request, I will still marry her," he replied in a cold voice. Hiashi growled at his blatant disrespect and disregard of his position. Calming himself down, Hiashi reined in his anger before he spoke. "Then why are you here?" he said harshly. "To make an offer," Naruto replied. "And what could you possibly have to offer me?" Hiashi said with a hint of sarcasm. At that, Naruto snapped his fingers and 2 scrolls poofed into his hand. He placed the 2 scrolls in front of the man as he spoke. "This," Naruto replied. Hiashi reluctantly took the scrolls from the desk and began to open them. As he opened the first scroll, his eyes widened as large as saucers, something Naruto found rather amusing, seeing the usually stoic Hyuga show such emotion at that time. He looked up at Naruto dumbfounded. How?" Hiashi said as he looked back at the scroll that had simple instructions as to how to remove the caged bird seal. Neji and Hiashi's mouth dropped down to the floor at the scene before, their eyes wide in shock. "Impossible," Neji said loudly in disbelief as he looked at the future Naruto. "How is this possible?" Hiashi said, not believing what he was seeing. "I believe he was about to answer before you two interrupted," Shikaku said with a yawn. Hiashi sent a slight glare to the older Nara as he continued to look at the screen. Naruto chuckled this. "I've been a seal master for quite some time, Hyuga-sama. Your seal was not that hard to crack open," he replied. "What do you mean, not that hard to crack open? We've had plenty of seal experts take a look at this seal and they said it was impossible. Even Master Jiraiya could not break it," Hiashi said as he stared at the scroll. "Let's just say that I'm a different seal master," Naruto said slyly. "After all, it was one of the areas my clan specialized in." "Clan?" several of the genin said dumbly. "Naruto has a clan?" Kakashi asked as he looked at both Hiruzen and Naruto. Neither individual said anything as they watched the screen. Hiashi raised an eyebrow at the blonde as he opened up the second scroll. When he looked at it, he saw it was instructions to apply another seal. It was named the Freedom's Call seal. It was small and was said to be applied to the back of the neck. Confused by this, Hiashi looked up at Naruto, who was still looking at the clan head. "And what's this?" Hiashi asked curiously. "It is an optional seal for you, Hiashi, just in case the council gives you problems with removing the seal," Naruto explained. "It would be a way to ensure that the Byakugan is protected while still maintaining unity within the Hyuga clan. Everyone would bear the same mark as one family, ending the division between the main and side houses of the Hyuga." Hiashi took one last look of the scroll before placing it back on the desk. He stared at the 2 scrolls before him as he thought about it. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, before turning back to the blonde. "It seems that I have underestimated you, Uzumaki-san," Hiashi said as he swallowed his pride. My apologies. Naruto sighed. Listen, Hiyashi-sama, I know that despite of your cold demeanor, you really love your daughters and do not want neither one of them to have to be branded with that mark. As a father, you only want what is best for your children and would do what you thought was necessary for the benefit and safety of your offspring. Naruto stated, although I am not yet a father, I understand the tough choices parents have to make sometime for the sake of their child. Even though I didn't agree with all of my father's decisions, I understood he did what he had to do in order to protect those who were precious to him. That led to his ultimate demise. He said solemnly. With that being said, that is one of the reasons I am giving it to you, Hyuga-sama. Not only do I not want your children to be subjected to dishonorable practices, I do not want my own offspring to be subjected to it. By doing this, I will also be ending the cycle of hatred your forefathers have created within this clan. Families serve and protect each other because they are family, not because they are forced to. Naruto concluded. It is also Hinata's dream to unite the main house and side branch. I wish to see this dream come true. Does Hinata know about this? Hiyashi asked. No, she does not. Naruto answered. In fact, she isn't even aware that I came to see you to request for her hand. Hiyashi thought about for a second. He had one more concern that he had needed to iron out with the blonde before he gave his answer. What about the council? He asked. That was the purpose of the Freedom's Call seal, Hyuga-sama. Their main argument would be the protection of the Byakugan. Mere elitism would not win in a political debate such as this. As I have said before, not only does that seal protect the Byakugan, it unites the Hyuga under one roof. Naruto replied. Besides, you are the clan head, and as the clan head, it is your responsibility to ensure the protection and comfort of your own clan, even if it's at the expense of a group of people who wish to bully rather than work together. The job of the council is to advise, not rule or dictate over the clan. As clan head, you act as a mini Hokage. You have the final say in such matters. He stated firmly. As far as the marriage is concerned, Naruto started with a mischievous glint in his eyes. I'm sure the council will have no qualms about it. Some very interesting news will be released within the upcoming weeks. Whatever woes they may raise will be easily nipped in bud once certain information spreads. You have nothing to worry about on that end. I have it covered. What are you going to do? Hiyashi asked curiously. You'll find out soon enough, Hyuga-san. Naruto said nonchalantly. Just be sure to establish and seal your position as clan head by the time this is over. The elders should not have as much power as they do. Seeing that the wasn't going to reveal his plans, Hiyashi brought his hand to his chin and closed his eyes. He was thinking about all of the things the blonde had told him today and was weighing his options. He had to admit that the blonde had made very good points and that he had all of his bases covered when he presented himself before him. He had made the clan head an offer he couldn't resist and knew how the game would end before it even began. Hiyashi lightly smirked at his soon-to-be son-in-law. Hiyashi opened his eyes and looked at the young Jinchuriki with a smirk. I seems that I have greatly misjudged, and for that I give my humblest apologizes. Hiyashi replied. You are quite the formidable political opponent, Uzumaki-san. Save such concessions for someone who actually cares about the points of which others view him. I'm not one to dabble in foolishness unless it is necessary. Naruto responded. However, I do need an answer, tonight, Hyuga-sama. It is getting quite late. Hiyashi thought about for a minute before giving in. Extending his hand out for Naruto to shake, Hiyashi spoke. Deal, he answered. Naruto grinned as he shook the clan head's hand with a firm shake. Excellent, Hyuga-sama, Naruto said as he shook his hand. Hinata and I will be here in the morning to sign the papers. After they sealed with a handshake, Naruto stood up. Stepping away from his chair, he bowed the Hyuga clan. It has been a pleasure doing business with you, Hiyashi Dono. I do hope you have a pleasant night. Naruto said as he turned around and walked towards the door. As he made his way towards the door, Hiyashi noticed another symbol on the back of his haori. It seemed to be a clan insignia of some sort. However, he has never seen it before. Although he wanted to ask the blonde what it was, he knew his chances at getting a direct answer were slim to none. Hiruzen and the others looked at the symbol curiously as well. They had never seen that insignia before now. However, Naruto knew that was the sign of the Namikaze clan, the clan of his father. He knew this because Minato had left in his personal notebook in the Uzumaki Namikaze compound in the outskirts of the village, not that he would tell anyone that. He could feel his pseudo-grandfather staring holes into the side of his head. He chose to ignore it and continued to watch the scene. Before exiting the door, Naruto stopped walking, causing Hiashi to look at him blonde curiously. I do hope that we are able to settle and move past our differences for the sake of your grandchildren, Hiashi-san. I do not wish my children to witness such disharmony between their father and grandfather. It is our roles as parents to be role models to our offspring, and I do not believe watching two respectable men argue like children is a positive example for them, especially to my sons. Naruto said as he looked over his shoulder. Hiashi nodded to him in understanding. Nodding back to his soon-to-be father-in-law, Naruto spoke again. Have a good night, Hiashi Dono, he said with a small smile before departing from the office. With Hinata, Hinata practically rushed to her room as she saw her boyfriend's footsteps near the door. She was safely in her room by the time her father's office door opened. She released a breath of relief, seeing that she wasn't caught eavesdropping. Hinata inwardly cursed at the fact that she could barely hear. It didn't help that she was caught by her younger sister. Groaned at the thought of giving her sister more blackmail material. As she walked into her room, Hinata noticed that there was a white card lying on the bed. When she picked it up, she saw it was a note from Naruto. Meet me at the Hokage monument and come as you are, Naruto. It looked freshly written, meaning he hadn't written it not long ago. It also meant that he knew she was here and possibly knew of her attempts to listen to their conversation. She groaned at her crafty boyfriend as she made her way out of the compound. When she got the fourth Hokage's head on the monument, she saw Naruto looking at the village. When he saw, he turned to her and smiled. Boss sent me to bring you to your destination, the clone said. Seeing that it was a clone, Hinata nodded her head and grabbed its hand. The clone disappeared in an elemental shunshin with Hinata. When Hinata was teleported to her destination, she gasped at the beauty of it. The clone had dispersed once it had done its job. Under two large trees was a picnic spread with a blanket and basket. Poking out of the basket was a bottle of fine wine. She saw that it was not far from the bank of the river where a waterfall runs into the stream. What made it even more magical were the fireflies that seemed to illuminate the scenery with its lights. Under the right tree, stood Naruto dressed in a black kimono. As she walked closer to him, she noticed the Uzumaki clan symbols on his haori as he stood there and looked at her with a smile. When she finally stopped in front of her, he grabbed both of her hands and brought them together as he kissed them. You look beautiful tonight, Haim, Naruto said lovingly as he looked into her eyes with his lips still on the knuckles of her hands. Hinata blushed prettily at his intimate stare. Thank you, Naruto-kun, she replied. Then she saw him let go of her hands and drop down on one knee. He took out a small box and held in one hand as he began to speak. Hinata, I enamored with your beauty and kindness since the first day I met you. Since then, I have always silently watched you from afar just as you've watched over me. I have seen you grow into a strong and resilient woman, and over the past year you have lured my heart more and more. Naruto started. You have always been my sunny place when I was down in life. It was your presence that kept me sane and proved to me there are people who care. You are the sunshine of my world, and your light is what beguiled me into your loving arms. I have always loved you, Hinata, and I always will. This past year has proved to me that I have made the right choice as to who I chose to be my life partner, and I thank Kami that you are she. Naruto said as he began to open the box. So will you make me the happiest man in the world and become my wife? Naruto asked as he opened the box, revealing a real diamond ring with pure gold. Asuma whistled at how expensive it looked. The girls looked in awe at the ring while the men groaned. Shikaku muttered something about troublesome women before getting smacked in the head by his wife. Hinata gasped at the sight of the ring as tears began to fall from her eyes. She nodded her rapidly, not being able to find the words to respond properly to his proposal. Naruto took the ring out of the box and took her hand. He placed the ring on her finger before standing up. Hinata pulled him into a passionate kiss as tears continued to flow down her eyes. Naruto picked her up and spun her around in joy as she kissed him. They pulled away from the kiss once he put her down. Hinata wiped her tears as she laughed in joy, causing Naruto to smile at her lovingly. Aishiteru, Naruto-kun, Hinata said as she embraced her boyfriend, now fiancé, into a hug. Aishiteru, Hinata-chan, Naruto said as he wrapped his protective arms around her and accepted her embrace, hugging her back. And with that, the scene ended. Several of the girls were in tears while others cooed at the two. Naruto was so red that it rivaled Hinata's. Hinata didn't know whether to faint or cry. The Hokage smiled warmly at his grandson who was trying hard to hide his blush by looking down. Yash, your burning flames of youth shines brighter the strength of 1,000 suns. Lee exclaimed with flames burning in his eyes. Yes, my youthful student. We must work even harder to make sure our power of youth comes even stronger. Guy said with anime tears streaming from his eyes. Guy sensei. Lee. Guy sensei. Lee. Guy sensei. Lee. Guy sensei. 10-10 looked at them with distressed shock while Neji sweat dropped at them. Kakashi smacked his forehead while the Hokage rubbed his temples muttering something about being too old for this shit. Sakura had a WTF look on her face while Sasuke just had a blank look on his face. I didn't know you could be so romantic, Naruto. Ino said. One of the best proposals I've ever seen. Ino's mom commented. Why can't you be that romantic sometimes, Asuma? Kurenai said to her boyfriend accusingly. Asuma's sweat dropped at this. Shikamaru muttered something about women being troublesome. Who would have thought someone would have beat Hiashi on his own court? Inochi said as he laughed. Naruto, you become quite the politician and strategist. Shikaku commented as he went over everything that transpired in the future conversation between Hiashi and Naruto. His plan was ingenious. Hiashi nodded his head in agreement as he looked at the current blushing blonde. Just who are you, Naruto Uzumaki? He thought in his head. Everyone began to quiet down as the screen flickered back on and another scene began to play from Hinata's life. Hinata was slightly older and sitting in the bed in a nightgown. She looked pregnant and was reading a book. She had the night lamp on so she could see. Even while pregnant, Hinata was still beautiful as her pregnancy seemed to make her glow even more. The woman on the bed looked around 21 or 22 years old as she hummed a sweet tune. Her humming stopped when she heard the door open. She looked up from her book as she saw a man enter into her room and shut the door behind them. The man was around 6 feet 3 inches and wore a samurai outfit on that was black and orange in cloth, but brown in leathered armor. His blonde hair was in a long ponytail that reached the bottom of his back and he wore a forehead protector with black cloth that had a single orange stripe on it. He had orange markings on his eye and bore light whisker marks on his cheeks. He had 2 samurai katana at his waist and a Japanese long bow hang across his shoulder with arrows on the other side of his waist. He smiled at sight of his wife pregnant with their 3rd child. Everyone was shocked at his appearance, although for different reasons. Some of the adults were surprised to see him wearing samurai armor as well as wielding their weapons. Some of the genin were shocked to see him with long hair that appeared to be straightened. Even Hiruzen was slightly shocked at his appearance. Naruto inwardly smirked. He looked like a total badass. You actually don't look that bad with long hair, Naruto. Choji commented as he munched on his chips. Some of the others nodded in the agreement while Naruto kind of ignored them and paid attention to the screen. Good evening, Haim, Naruto greeted with a smile as he began to remove the weapons from his persons. Hello, Naruto-kun, Hinata said with a cute smile. Welcome back. It's great to be back, dear. Naruto said as he stored his weapons into a scroll and began to remove his armor. So how was the trip? Hinata inquired. It was refreshing, Naruto said as he continued to take off his armor. Me and Mifune really had a blast in our spars. He says I keep him in shape. Naruto chuckled. Hinata laughed at that. She knew that despite of the general's hard demeanor was a good-hearted man. She knew that deep down, the older man appreciated Naruto's company and enjoyed hanging with him. She remembered the time Mifune slapped Naruto upside his head with the sheath of a katana for calling him an old man. The whole argument turned into an all-out sword duel. By the end of the spar, both individuals were injured and in need of medical care. Even as they were patched up, they laughed heartily at their situation. She believed that Mifune secretly wanted Naruto to be his predecessor after he moves on to the afterlife, even though Naruto made it clear that he wouldn't be able to. Despite of it, the two remained good friends and would meet up for an occasional spar. This trip, however, was more of a political and business trip. He had to go to the Land of Iron for 3 weeks to meet up with Mifune as well as several nobles and Gaara. Well, I'm glad you had fun, dear. Hinata said with a smile. So how did things go with you? Naruto asked as he finished taking off his armor. Things are going well. She's due in 2 months' time. Hinata replied. Excellent, Naruto said cheerfully as he walked over to Hinata and gave her a peck on the lips. I'll be right back, he said as he began to make his way into the bathroom. She resumed back to her reading as she heard the bathroom door shut. After about 20 minutes, she heard the bathroom door and the light switch off. As she looked up, her breath hitched as her eyes got her fill of the glorious sight before her. There stood Naruto with nothing but a pair of orange boxers. His long hair was now spiky again and his side bangs returned. The blonde had a burly build that was evenly balanced by his height. He sported a complete six-pack and had an Enbu tattoo on his left arm. Along the spine of his back, were the 7 virtues of the Bushido, tattooed in black kanji. He still wore the first Hokage's necklace around his neck. He put his hair back in a ponytail, this time with his bangs framing his face as he made his way over to the bed where his wife laid. The women blushed at the sight of adult Naruto. It didn't help that his boxers didn't hide how well endowed he was. Kurenai and the wives of the clan head tried to either divert their eyes from the screen or strain their eyes from traveling any further down the boy's body. Ino had stars in her eyes while Ten and Sakura turned beet red. Hinata felt blood trickle down her nose as she looked at her future husband. Kakashi giggled perversely while Hiruzen had to fight the urge to do the same. Seems like Hinata chose well, nay Kurenai? Inochi's wife said to the girl's mother figure. It would seem so, Kurenai said as she composed herself. Hinata tried to stop the perverted thoughts that were coming to her head so she wouldn't have a full-blown nosebleed from the scene. Hiyashi glared daggers at Naruto who had his head held down the whole time sporting a full-body blush. Kurama laughed at his tenant's expense. It seems you've grown rather well, Naruto. Kurama teased. Shut up, Kurama, Naruto yelled in head as his blush got deeper. Kurama continued to laugh and tease the blonde about it. Naruto made his way to the bed with his wife who was eye-raping him and laid in between her legs. He rested head on her belly and began to rub as he cooed at the life form growing inside her stomach. Hinata began to run her finger through his hair as he rested his head on his stomach. As he gently traced her pregnant belly, he began to talk to his growing offspring. Hey there my little Akachin. Naruto started. Your Two-san is finally back from his trip. I hope you haven't been giving your Ka-san any trouble while I was away. Hinata smiled as she continued to play with his locks. Me and your Ka-san are waiting for you little one. Your Oni-san's and Oni-san is waiting for you as well. I can't wait for you to arrive. Naruto said. You know, your Two-san never had a family growing up. Your Obachan and Ojiji-chan died at a very young age so I was the only child. Naruto continued. It was very lonely growing. I had no friends or family. I had a Jiji, but nothing could replace or compare to having a family of your own flesh and blood. Growing up alone and having to figure out things for yourself at the age of 3 has its trials and tribulations. What your Two-san went through was a tough break and something no one so young should have experienced. I was happy to find your cousin's light in my darkness. Naruto said with a smile. Hinata began to cry as her husband continued to talk to their child. I vowed from a young age that I would be there for my children and not die for my children and live. I promised myself that I wouldn't leave my offspring and your cousin alone and would be here to see you grow. He continued. That is my promise to you little one. You will never have suffered the pain of loneliness. You have 2 cousins, Oni-sans, and One-ichans waiting for you as well as a clan with family who will welcome you into this world. You will have a Two-san and cousins that will be here to see you grow and will have siblings who will help lead and guide you down your path. You will have a different life than the one your Touchin had and I would do anything to make you and your mothers happy. He said, I love you my little Akachin. Hinata felt a kick in her stomach at what he said that brought even more tears to her eyes. Naruto felt the kick also and had an odd expression on his face while he smiled at his child's response to him as he continued to her belly. She kicked. Naruto mused to himself as his head still rested her stomach. I can even feel her heartbeat. Naruto brought his head up to look at his wife and saw the stream of tears that escaped her eyes. He grabbed her chin and kissed her passionately as he wiped the tears from her face. When he pulled away, he gave her a small smile. Do not weep, Haim. You're too beautiful to shed such tears. He said as he kissed her forehead. Majority of the occupants in the room were in tears as the scene ended. Even the brooding Uchiha's heart was touched at the moment. When he turned to the blonde, He saw a few tears escape his face before he quickly wiped them away. He saw him smile a little. Guy and Lee were bawling, screaming about the flames of youth, while Hinata had tears of joy seeing her future self so happy. Kurenai and the Nara and Yamanaka matriarchs were crying with their hands over their mouth, while some of the men shed a few tears. Neji looked at the blonde with a slight smile, while the female genin were teary-eyed. Even the stoic Shino and lazy Nara showed a little emotion at the touching moment. The Hokage smiled at his grandson while Kakashi wiped the tear that escaped his eye. Before anyone could say anything, the scene changed again to another part of Hinata's future. A much older Hinata was currently in a hospital room in labor. Her screams could be heard from outside the labor room. In the lobby sat two older women. A blonde one, now recognized as the former Kazekage's daughter, who was holding a red-haired baby girl, and another red-haired who was a member of the Uzumaki clan and a second cousin to Naruto. She was holding a black-haired baby boy who had a distinguishable set of Hyuga eyes. Surrounding the women were 20 other children that varied in age. They were a collection of blondes, red hairs, indigo heads, and raven-haired individuals who were all the children of Naruto Uzumaki. Some of the older ones looked a little nervous while the younger ones looked excited for the arrival of their new sibling. "Looks like someone's been busy," Kakashi teased. "That's a lot of children," Ino commented. "No kidding," Asuma said as a light sweat drop escaped the side of his brow. In the hospital room, Hinata was currently squeezing the life out of Naruto's hand as she continued to labor and trying to push her daughter out. Naruto, whose hair was in a trimmed ponytail with his locks framing the sides of his face, was pale as he held his wife's hand during her delivery. "Naruto Uzumaki, I swear I'm not ever letting you touch me again," Hinata yelled as she continued to push, almost breaking his hand. "I didn't know you could be so loud, Hinata," Kiba said as he winced at the crack of Naruto's hand. Hinata continued to look as she gave birth to her child. Hiyashi looked like he was going to faint at the sight of seeing his oldest daughter going through labor. "It's okay, honey," Naruto said, ignoring her statement. "Not much longer until she's out," he said as he tried to reassure her. She yelled again in labor as she continued to push. "Just one more push, Hinata. One more push and you can see your baby girl," a redhead by the name of Karen Uzumaki said. She was a cousin of Naruto and delivered his first 5 children. Adoring her forehead was a red diamond-shaped mark in the middle of her forehead. "Ah," Hinata gave one long push that pushed out the rest of her baby. When the baby came out, Karen cut the umbilical cord and cleaned the blood off the child. The baby cried as she wrapped her in a pink blanket. Naruto cried with tears of joy as Karen handed their child to a tired Hinata. Karen walked out to go get the rest of the family who were anxiously waiting for their sibling. Naruto kissed the top of her forehead as she held their little girl. When she opened her eyes, she looked up at her mother for the first time, causing Hinata shed a few tears. Had blue eyes and blonde hair a bit darker than her father's and had a mixture Naruto's and Hinata's facial features. Naruto wrapped his arms around them and squeezed them lightly. "Hinata, you have gifted me with yet another bundle of joy. Another child we created as a symbol of our love and union. You continue to make me the happiest man alive. Arigato," Naruto said with joy. Hinata smiled at her husband. After holding her a couple of moments, she handed the child to her father, who gladly took her into her arms. He smiled brightly at his baby girl as he held her. She giggled him as she grabbed one of his fingers with her tiny hands. Hinata smiled tiredly at the sight. "You look just like your Ogigi-san," Naruto commented as he looked at his youngest. At this point, Karen had came back to the room with the rest of their family entered into the room. Tamari walked to the other side of the bed with their child Shoga in her arms. She gave Hinata a kiss on the forehead. She grabbed her hand and gave it a light squeeze. "You did it," Tamari said with a gentle smile. Hinata smiled back at her and lightly squeezed her hand back. The girls cooed at the sight of their new baby sister while the boys smiled. Hinata smiled weakly as the family huddled around the bed. 35-year-old Naruto looked at his family proudly with his chest puffed out as he held his daughter. His oldest sons, who were twins, now 16-year-old, nodded to him in respect and pride. Karen smiled at the family moment. "Everyone," Naruto started, getting everyone's attention. "Welcome to the newest member of the family, Nasumi Uzumaki Namikaze." "Namikaze?" Ino asked confusedly. Kakashi's eyes widened as he looked at Naruto, who avoided his gaze. Wasn't Namikaze the last name of the fourth Hokage? Sakura asked. You know, now that I think about, he does favor the fourth. Shikamaru said as he looked at the current picture of the deceased Hokage. Then that means. Ino's eyes widened in shock as she turned to Naruto. Hiruzen looked at his grandson, who refused to meet his eyes. So he must already know. Hiruzen said as he turned to the occupants who were looking at him as if asking him was it true, silently. Hiruzen nodded his head and sighed. Yes, Naruto is the son of the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze. Hiruzen admitted. Why didn't you tell me? Kakashi asked kind of angrily. I did it for his protection. You know Minato had many enemies, and if word got about him having a son, it would have brought unwanted and unneeded attention to the village. Hiruzen said. But, Kakashi started. Enough. Naruto snapped, stopping the copycat ninja. Me and Gigi will be discussing things later, so, but out of it, Hitaki. He said coldly, without looking at the Chunin. Others were about to reprimand the blonde for speaking to his sensei in such a manner, but was silenced by the raised hand of the Hokage. Before he could speak, screen changed and a new scene began to play. Hinata was sitting on the couch in the family room of the Uzumaki Namikaze residence in Uzu-Shiogakure. She had her long indigo hair down and had a purple diamond-shaped mark on the middle of her forehead. Tamari had her legs draped over her lap as Hinata was massaging her feet. She played with her indigo locks as the both conversed and looked through the family photo album. 41-year-old Hinata Uzumaki Namikaze was gushing over her picture of their third youngest, Himawari. A.N. Look at the top for the picture. Kawaii. Ino and Tenten squealed as they looked at the infant in older Hinata's hand. She's so cute, Kurenai said as the clan matriarchs cooed at the child. She's like the perfect blend of her and Naruto. The Yamanaka clan matriarch commented. She's adorable, Sakura gushed. The clan heads slightly smiled at the picture before them. Even the Hyuga clan head gave a small smile. Shino, Shikamaru, and even Neji smirked at the sight. Naruto and Hinata blushed, but at the same time looked in awe of their child. Alright, girl-on-girl action. Kiba replied with a wolfy grin as he referred to the way Tamari and Hinata were positioned on the couch. The guy's sweat dropped at his comment while Ino slapped the mutt in the back of his head. Hinata almost fainted at that comment while Naruto tried to hold back a nosebleed. Hey look, they're looking at the other pictures. Tenten pointed out. Everyone turned their attention back to the screen as the future Hinata flipped through the photo album. A.N. Depending on the response from my audience, I may or may not do a separate chapter with pictures of the entire family, if you guys like. Just comment and let me know. Wow, you make some good-looking kids, Naruto. Kakashi commented as he looked at the redhead with her mother's Byakugan eyes. Is it me or does that blonde boy look like a blonde, blue-eyed version of Sasuke? Sakura responded. Interesting, Shibi thought to himself as he looked at some of the children. He didn't miss that some of them had Uchiha-like features. As Hinata and Tamari continued to look through the pictures of their children over the years, a blonde male entered the family room. He was wearing black shinobi pants, black ninja sandals, a black long-sleeve shirt, and a white haori with a gold necklace. His hair was cut short, wore black fingerless gloves, and he had a katana on his hip. He looked good for his age and his cerulean blue eyes had an icy look. He greeted the ladies as he entered the room. Good afternoon, ladies, Naruto said as he took off his katana and placed it on the side of the chair near the television. Hello, Naruto-kun, Hinata said happily. Hey old man, Tamari said jokingly. She had long since grew her hair and currently had it down. You weren't saying that last night, my dear. He replied unchastely. That instantly silenced Tamari as both her and Hinata blushed at the memory of last night's activities. Smirking, Naruto sat beside Hinata and stretched Tamari's legs to where her feet were now resting on his lap and he took over Tamari's foot massage. She moaned in satisfaction as his magical hands began to knead her feet. Hinata just rested her head on Naruto's shoulder as she closed the photo album. So how's your day? Hinata asked her husband as she rested her head on his shoulder. Today was good. I think Shinichiku is ready to take over as leader of this village. Naruto said. He has been doing well in his studies and can perform the duties required of the job efficiently. I'm pleased to hear that. I know he's been working real hard to impress you," Hinata said with a smile. "Well, I am more than impressed with him. I'm proud to call him my son and next predecessor." Naruto replied, "I remember when he used to follow you around when he was younger. He would always talk about being just like his dad and being the next Kazekage." Temari said with a chuckle. Hinata and Naruto chuckled as well at the memory. "Hi, I thought it was the most adorable thing." Hinata giggled. "You know, he's had his eyes on a certain princess of the Nadeshiko village." Temari said slyly, "You mean Shizuka's oldest daughter?" Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow. "Yes. Did you already know?" Hinata asked. "Yes, Shinichiku made it his business to inform me of his affections and desire to wed the girl. While I do not doubt he could defeat her in a match, it is negotiations with her mother that would prove difficult. She is her heir after all." Naruto answered. Then he grinned. "I, of course, always have away such troublesome things," he said with a foxy grin. "Whatever you're planning, do not underestimate their kunoichi, Naruto," Temari said. "They are quite powerful and are not easily beaten." "I have taken that into account, Temari-chan. Several of our daughters trained with them, after all," Naruto replied. "Well, Shinichiku is not the only one who has captured woman's affections," Hinata said. Naruto raised an eyebrow at his wife. "What do you mean, Hinata-chan?" Temari asked curiously. "When we went to visit my sister last week, a certain Hyuga seemed to show certain interests in Wais," Hinata replied. "Oh really?" Naruto said, now intrigued. "Who is she?" Temari inquired. "Her name's Sayumi. Very sweet girl, but very headstrong," Hinata informed. "Is Wais aware of her interests?" Naruto asked. "I believe so. In fact, I believe he has light affections for her as well. He's just a bit on the shy side," Hinata said with a giggle. Naruto laughed at this. "He truly does mostly take after you, Haim," he said teasingly. Hinata laughed as well. "It seems so. I do think he will come to grow out of it. He just needs a little push," she commented. "Our children are really growing up on us, huh?" Temari said as she relaxed while Naruto continued to rub her feet. "Indeed they are," Naruto said distantly. "Haim? Himegimi Hana?" he called out. "Yes," they both answered simultaneously. "Arigato," Naruto said as he looked at them both. "You both granted me the opportunity of a family. You have made me the proud father of 21 beautiful children. You both know that I never had a family coming up and that I have always been alone," he said kind of sadly. "However, now I've been gifted with not only 2 beautiful wives, but plenty of children that I can call my own. You guys have given me so much more than you can imagine, and I am honored that you saw me fit to be the one to father our offspring," he continued. "In life and in death, I will always love you two with all of my being. Aishiteru," he said lovingly and genuinely. They shed a couple of tears before they both got up and embraced Naruto into a hug. They gave him a kiss on the cheek, both on either side of him. "Aishiteru, Naru-chan," the both said as they kissed him on the cheek, which made Naruto's smile widen. A foxy grin then etched onto his face. "Say, where are the kids?" Naruto asked slyly. "They're staying the night at the Uzumaki clan compound. Your family wanted to spend some time with them, so they will be there until Wednesday," Temari answered. Naruto licked his lips and grinned salaciously as he created a seal-less blood clone. Hinata and Temari felt themselves be picked up bridal style. Naruto licked his lips again as he began to carry them out of the family room and up the stairs to his master bedroom. "Excellent. That means we will not be disturbed tonight," Naruto said as he walked into his grand bedroom. On the giant king-sized bed were rose petals and plenty of pillows. Sitting on his nightstand were cheese, chocolate, and berries with a bottle of special wine he ordered from the Crescent Moon Kingdom. He placed them both in the bed before turning around to shut the door. His blue eyes had a mischievous gleam in them while he grinned foxily as he shut the door to his double-door bedroom and locked it. The "Do Not Disturb" sign was already on the door. Everyone lightly blushed as the scene ended. They already pieced together what future Naruto was planning and could tell it was one of their intimate moments. The older women were kind of shocked at his strong drive, seeing that they were much older in the aforementioned scene. "So who's next?" Ino asked as Hinata awkwardly made her way back to her seat with a red blush. Kurenai could vaguely see the blood that was dripping from her nose as she sat down. The stoic Uchiha got up and made his way to the matrix. Seeing that he was moving towards the seals, Everyone figured he silently volunteered and waited until the Uchiha got to his destination. Sasuke reached towards the matrix with 1,000 questions whirling around in his head. What would the matrix show him? Would it be his death? Would he die at the hands of Itachi? If so, then how did he have a daughter with Sakura? Had Itachi allowed him to live that long only to rip him from his family and do to his daughter the same thing he had done to Sasuke? If so, why did he have another son, and why would Itachi have become the Hokage? He didn't know what to think. At the thought of something happening to his children, a protective rage filled Sasuke's being. Sarada and Daisuke might not have been born yet, but the fact of the matter was that they were Uchiha. He wouldn't be alone anymore, and though he would never admit it out loud, based on what he had saw in Sakura's projection, the Rosette on his team had made a great mother. Naruto looked rather amused by the Uchiha's uncertainty. With his feelings jumbled, Sasuke channeled chakra into his feet, causing the ceiling matrix to come to life with bright blue light. Soon, the illegible scribbling of the matrix twisted and morphed into a screen and it burst to life. Sasuke and Itachi were in the woods fighting. Both brothers had their Sharingans activated, however, there was something different. Blood was coming from Itachi's mouth and Sasuke's clothes looked tattered. Sasuke was breathing hard in anger as Itachi just stared emotionlessly at his brother. Growling with his Tripe Tomo Sharingan activated, Sasuke charged up a Chidori and charged toward his brother with hate and fury in his eyes. The Chidori? Kakashi and Guy said at the same time in complete shock. What is that? Ino asked. It's Kakashi's signature jutsu. It's said to have gained its name, Lightning Cutter, when he used it to split a bolt of lightning, Guy informed. Some of the genin looked at Kakashi in awe while Kakashi was trying to figure out how or when did he teach Sasuke his technique. Sasuke continued to watch the screen at the fight between him and his brother. I'll kill you, Sasuke said as he aimed his Chidori at his brother's heart. Before Sasuke could strike him and before Itachi could move, a yellow flash appeared in between them, blocking the technique. Sasuke felt someone smack the hand the Reikuri was charged him, causing his jutsu to complete miss his brother, and hit a tree on the other side of opening. When Sasuke finally got up, recovering from his crash into the tree, he saw someone he hasn't seen in close to 4 years. There standing in front of his brother was a blonde male. His hair was spiky and he had red highlights on the bangs that framed the sides of his face. He wore a orange, black, and red ninja uniform and had a leaf cloak on his persons. He had whisker marks on his cheeks and was tall. However, that is not what shocked Sasuke the most. Staring back at him in an emotionless glare were a pair of eternal Mangekyo Sharingans. Naruto stiffened as everyone in the gasped at the sight on the screen. He looked at no one as they all began to rapidly comment. No freaking way, Kiba exclaimed. Impossible. Mebuki Haruno yelled. How? Kakashi she yelled. Asuma's cigarette fell out of his mouth as the Hokage's pipe hit the desk. Everyone turned to look at Naruto. Most in complete shock and disbelief. Sasuke didn't even know how to feel himself. He could only stare blankly at the blonde who was currently looking down, his hair shading his face. Hiruzen looked at the blonde in confusion. Based on the way Naruto responded, he'd tell the blonde already knew. If he had those eyes, why wouldn't he tell them? Was this the big secret you've been keeping from me, Naruto? Hiruzen asked as the scene continued to play. Naruto? Sasuke exclaimed with his eyes as wide as saucers. Stand down, Uchiha-san, the blonde said cool and collectedly. Forgetting his shock, Sasuke growled in anger and fury. This isn't any of your business, Uzumaki, he roared. Unmoved by his burst of anger, Naruto responded. I cannot allow you to kill him, Uchiha-san, so I suggest you to stand down, now, he said coldly. In blind rage, charged at Naruto with a Reikuri at blinding speeds, his curse mark level at stage 3. At the last moment, Naruto disappeared in a yellow flash. When Sasuke saw that he was gone, he looked around for the blonde in outrage. After a couple of minutes, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his neck. The last thing he saw was Naruto's Sharingan eyes staring down at him before falling into a dark oblivion. Once Sasuke was knocked out, Naruto turned towards Itachi who was laying against a tree not far from them. He was staring at Naruto as he coughed up blood. What did you do to my brother? Itachi said in a rasped voice. His Sharingan eyes staring back into Naruto's. Naruto said nothing. Itachi suddenly found himself lying flat on the ground on his back. He looked down to see two golden chains on his ankle. He followed the path of the chains and saw that they coming from Naruto's back. Once the chains retracted, Naruto deactivated his Sharingan and his eyes returned to their original cerulean blue. He walked over to Uchiha and kneeled beside him. Itachi looked up at the blonde as his eyes scanned over his body, as if inspecting the sick Uchiha. After a couple of moments, Itachi decided to speak. "Who are you?" Itachi said weakly. "I must say I'm a little hurt you could forget your old commander, Weasel-san," Naruto said as he continued to inspect the raven head. Itachi's eyes widened in shock. Taicho?" he said in surprise. "Taicho?" Kakashi said as he narrowed his eyes at Naruto who still had his head down. Naruto said nothing. After he finished his inspection, Itachi saw the blonde clasp his hands together and close his eyes. It was as if he was meditating. After a couple of seconds, a black diamond-like marking appeared on his forehead, kind of like Tsunade's Strength of 100 seal. However, what made it different was that a red dot was at the center of the diamond. He went through a couple of hand signs so fast that not even the strongest Sharingan could keep up with before laying his hands over Itachi's body. Green, blue, and silver chakra began to emit from his hands as he continued to close his eyes in concentration. After a couple of minutes, Itachi began to feel himself become sleepy. He took one last look at the blonde before he too fell into a deep state of unconsciousness. Shortly afterwards, chakra stopped emitting from his hands. The symbol on his forehead began to dissipate as he opened his eyes. He looked at both Itachi and Sasuke before standing back up. He put the hood over his head before creating a seal-less shadow clone. While the shadow clone picked up Sasuke, Naruto picked up Itachi and threw him over his shoulder. After gathering the Uchiha brothers, the clone turned to Naruto and nodded at him. Nodding back at it, both Naruto and his clone disappear in an elemental wind shunshin. "What was that technique?" Inochi said as the scene ended. "I do not know. It appeared to be a mixture of both Tsunade's Strength of 100 seal and the Mystic Palm technique." Hiruzen commented as he wondered what the technique was as well. "Medical ninjutsu?" Kakashi asked in shock. Everyone was surprised when Sasuke suddenly appeared in front of Naruto, pinning him down to the floor. His Sharingan was activated as he looked down at the blonde who refused to meet his gaze. He growled at the blonde. "Show them to me," Sasuke said as he pinned down the blonde. Kakashi was about to intervene. The Hokage stopped them. He wanted to see what Naruto would do. "Now," he roared, his double Tomo Sharingan glaring holes at Naruto's head. "That is enough, Uchiha-san," the Hokage ordered. Sasuke looked at the Hokage and saw that he was giving a stern look. He gritted his teeth as he slightly nodded, not wanting to get on the Hokage's bad side. He looked at Naruto who was looking at him. His eyes were cold and emotionless. His steel cobalt-piercing gaze glaring at him that made Sasuke feel a little uneasy for a minute. He slowly released his grip off of the short blonde and stood up. As he made his way back to the Matrix, Naruto stood up calmly. Everyone watched him intently, wondering what he was going to do. Naruto dusted his orange jumpsuit off. He said nothing as he sat back down in chair, put his head down as if nothing happened. Everyone was silent. The tension in the room was thick. The third was a little relieved when Sasuke began to channel chakra to his feet once again on the ceiling matrix. Sasuke needed answered. If Naruto was going to be a coward and not tell him himself, then he figured the only way he would get them is if continued to watch his future. Channeling chakra to his feet, the matrix began to glow blue again. The screen appeared on the wall. Another scene began to play. Sasuke groaned as he began to feel a sharp pain in his neck. He winced at the soreness as his eyes began to open. When his vision became clear, he found himself resting against a tree clearing. He looked around and saw that he was in what looked like a camp. There was a bonfire lit in the middle of the small clearing and they were surrounded by trees. He could hear the flow of water and assumed that there was a river or stream not far from them. When he looked across the bonfire, he growled at the sight. Laid against a tree not far from him was his brother, Itachi Uchiha. He appeared to be sleeping or unconscious. Sasuke couldn't really tell. When he tried to get up, his body felt weak. He could barely move his arm. He growled in frustration. As he tried to move around, he stopped as he remembered what happened before he woke up. Before he could get angry, He jumped in surprise when he heard a voice began to speak. "So you're awake?" the voice said as the figure began to make his way to the clearing. It was Naruto. He was still wearing the attire he had when he first interfered in the fight between the Uchiha. The only difference was he was carrying a small bag in one hand and in the other, a long line of stringed fish he had just caught from the river. He sat down on the ground, placing the bag beside him. He reached in the bag and pulled out a cloth, spreading it across the ground. He then placed the stringed fish on the cloth before taking out some other things that looked like herbs and placing them beside the cloth. "You!" Sasuke roared as he tried to get up from his spot only to find that he could not move. "You shouldn't move so much, Uchiha-san. The more you move, the more you won't be able to move," Naruto said as he began rub one of the fish with herb. "What did you do to me?" Sasuke said angrily. "It's a chakra-draining seal," Naruto replied. "I put it on you when I knocked you unconscious." Sasuke growled in anger and annoyance. Why would you help this traitor?" he said as he sent menacing glares at his currently unconscious brother. "It is not my story to tell, Uchiha-san," Naruto answered as he moved on to the next fish. "What do you mean?" Sasuke said irritatingly. Right on cue, Itachi began to stir. Both individuals turned their attention towards the waking man. Itachi groaned as he rubbed the side of his head. "What happened to me?" Itachi said more to himself. "You almost died," Naruto said, startling the older Uchiha. Itachi opened his eyes to see both Naruto and his younger brother sitting around a fire. His brother was staring at him blankly while Naruto appeared to be seasoning fish. He also noticed that he couldn't feel any of his chakra. Keeping his calm demeanor, Itachi spoke to Naruto. "Where are we?" he asked. "We are a day's journey from Konohamaru," Naruto answered. Both Itachi and Sasuke looked surprised by his answer. What in the hell was he thinking? "You do know that we are both missing Nin, right?" Itachi said. "Hi, I do," Naruto replied curtly. "Then why are you taking us there, Dobi?" Sasuke asked. "For reasons I will reveal soon enough, but for now," Naruto started, "we have several issues to have to resolve." "What issues?" Itachi said, wondering what the blonde was talking about. It was at this that Naruto turned to Itachi and looked him directly in the eye. "You need to tell Sasuke the truth," Naruto replied. Itachi narrowed his eyes at the young Jinchuriki. "How do you know about that?" he asked suspiciously. "I was your captain, remember? Did you not think I would find out?" Naruto answered. "What is he talking about, Itachi?" Sasuke said as he narrowed his eyes at his brother. "What are you keeping from me?" Itachi looked at Naruto for a minute, who was looking right back at him. It was like they were having a silent argument. Seeing that there was no way out of it, Itachi gave in. He closed his eyes and sighed as he turned to his brother, who was looking at him expectantly. Opening his eyes and clearing his throat, he spoke. "I was ordered to assassinate our clan, Sasuke," Itachi admitted. "What?" Sasuke yelled. Everyone looked in shock at the missing Nin's confession. The Hokage rubbed his temples. "What?" Sasuke exclaimed. "The Uchiha clan. Our father. He and the council was planning a coup d'etat," Itachi said. "When negotiating wasn't working, me and my friend Shisui offered to help. The plan was for Shisui to cast Koto Amatsukami on the clan head to subtly end the coup d'etat. However, Shisui was attacked," Itachi stated. "By who?" Naruto asked. "Danzo," Itachi said through gritted teeth. "I don't know what happened exactly, however, I do know that when I found him, one of his eyes were missing. When I asked him what happened, the only thing he said was Danzo. Before he died, he entrusted me to protect both the village and the Uchiha name, giving me his left eye. You know, he left the clan a suicide note, pleading father and the council not to follow through the coup. However, due to our clan's narrow-mindedness, they didn't understand the plea of peace and reconciliation and continued on with their plans for the coup," Itachi said solemnly. "Understand that if our clan would have went through with the coup, our village would have been plagued with civil war. Many of lives would have been lost, including yours, Sasuke. And I couldn't let that happen," Itachi explained. "So I ended the coup the best way I knew how. By volunteering to be the executioner of our clan for their offenses. I asked the third Hokage if I could let you live, knowing what I was going to have to do to my own clansmen," Itachi said. "Before I left, I asked that you be protected and looked over while I was away. I also asked the third to keep it all a secret. Not even the council knew of the Uchiha clan's plans of betrayal. I had to keep the truth from you, Sasuke. If you would have known, you would have taken on the mantle of the curse of hatred that our clan has suffered through generations. I didn't want that for you. He continued. However, it seems I have failed in that aspect as well. He said guiltily. I'm sorry, Sasuke. I truly am, Itachi said, looking away from his younger brother. It was silent at the campsite. Even Naruto had stopped to listen to Itachi's account of the story. Of course, he was aware of the reasons why Itachi had killed his clan, however, he didn't know what had happened in between. When he was done, Naruto was outraged. Sasuke was quiet, processing everything his brother had revealed to him. The silence lasted for several minutes until Naruto broke it. Danzo, huh? Naruto said as he began sticking the fish on 3 long sticks. Hey. His bangs shadowed his eyes and he was giving off a dark aura. This caused both Itachi and Sasuke to turn to the blonde. You know, Shisui was a great shinobi. One that had my utmost respect out of many in the ninja ranks. Naruto said. He was honorable and a ninja worthy of his caliber and skill. It saddened me to hear that he had died. Where were you during the massacre? Itachi asked. I was on a mission. I had arrived 2 days later after the incident. I can't say that I was surprised that it happened. Naruto admitted. Why didn't you tell me? Sasuke asked Naruto. Naruto turned to Sasuke, who was looking at him. He instantly saw that the boy was emotionally raw. He could see how truly broken he was. His eyes was filled with hurt, pain, longing, and so much more. He was in a vulnerable state that Naruto had not seen from the usually brooding Uchiha. Itachi looked away in shame. Sighing, Naruto centered his attention on the young Uchiha. As I said before, Sasuke. It was not my place to tell. Naruto said. Besides, it was a SSS classified secret that only Itachi and the Hokage were supposed to know. If I would have told you, I would have been called into question and even executed if it had been known that I told you. He said as he released Sasuke from his seal. Sasuke and the Hokage both looked at Naruto, who continued to avoid anyone's gaze. What exactly did you do to me, Naruto? Itachi asked. What do you mean? Naruto asked. I am aware of the chakra suppressor seals on me. However, my body feels different. I don't feel as, Itachi started, but was cut off by Naruto. Sick? Naruto finished. That's because I healed you of your illness. Even your eyes have been restored. He said as put the fish over the fire to cook. Itachi's looked at the blonde in shock. How? He asked with a shocked expression etched on his face. One of the many tricks up my sleeve, Itachi-san. Naruto replied. Why did you intervene? Sasuke asked. Because Itachi didn't deserve to die. Naruto answered. That brings me to my next question. Why are you here and what do you want with us? Itachi asked. Sasuke nodded in agreement, wanting to know as well. Let's make a deal, Itachi-san. Naruto stated. Okay, Itachi said hesitantly. I will answer 5 of your questions to the best of my ability if you give me information on the Adatsuki. Naruto bargained. Itachi thought about it for a moment. What did he really have to lose? Pain was dead last time he checked and him and Kisame split up. The Adatsuki probably thought he was dead since his ring was destroyed in his fight with Sasuke and Naruto had chakra suppressing seals on him. He had nothing. He was snapped out of his musings when Naruto spoke again. Just in case you need a little motivation. Naruto said as he threw a scroll at Itachi. Itachi caught the scroll and raised an eyebrow at Naruto, who shrugged and kept cooking the fish. Out of curiosity, Itachi opened the scroll. When he channeled chakra into it, he was surprised at what popped out of it. Lying in front of him was Samehada, an Adatsuki ring and jacket, and a smaller scroll he assumed was the head of his longtime partner, Kisame Hoshigaki. He was a formidable swordsman, I must say. He wasn't as good as Momochi, but his skill was nothing to laugh at. Naruto said as he grabbed 2 of the long sticks of fish from the fire. I ran into your pal on my way to retrieve you, actually. Held me up for quite some time. But, hey, what do you expect from one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist? Naruto walked to Sasuke and gave him one of the sticks. Sasuke hesitantly took one and took a bit out of one of his fish. He had to admit it was delicious. It was even better than Suigetsu's. Realizing how hungry he was, he began to devour the piece of fish, moving on to the next piece. Naruto shook his head as he walked over to Itachi and handed him the other stick. After Itachi resealed the contents back into the scroll, he grabbed the stick from Naruto. As Naruto walked back to the fire to grab his stick, Itachi took a bite out of his fish. He hummed in satisfaction as Naruto took his seat on the ground and began to eat his fish as well. After a couple of moments of silence, Itachi spoke. "You cook well, Naruto-san," Itachi complimented. Sasuke grunted in agreement. "Thanks," Naruto said as he started working on his second piece of fish. "Okay," Itachi replied. "Okay?" Naruto said, wanting him to clarify what he meant. "It's a deal," Itachi clarified. "Excellent," Naruto chirped. "I will start by answering your first two questions, Itachi-san." Itachi nodded, motioning him to go on. "The reason why I am here for you, Itachi, is to get some information about the Atatsuki. While there are other reasons, none are more important than that reason alone. I am here for Sasuke, simply because I made a promise to someone against my better judgment to bring him back to the village. I'm sure Sasuke knows who I am talking about," Naruto said, glancing at Sasuke before turning back to Itachi. "The reason I want you is for the reasons I just mentioned, including bringing you back to the village." Naruto said, "You are a hero and should be treated as such even if the actions you had to take wasn't the prettiest of ones. However, it just shows the harsh reality of the shinobi world. People and things will always be sacrificed for a greater good or evil," he said sagely. "Plus, you two are the last Uchiha. I mean, at least you guys can rebuild the clan quicker now that there are two of you. I'm not sure Teme over here would have been able to handle it all alone," Naruto said jokingly. "TCH, whatever Dobi," Sasuke said with an eye roll. Itachi laughed at Naruto's joke, something he hasn't done in a long time. He even saw the side of Sasuke's mouth curve a little as he feasted on his fish. After he settled down, he started to question Naruto again. "So how?" Itachi asked. "I'm afraid you're going to have to be more specific that, Itachi-san," Naruto said as he took a bite out of another piece of fish. "How did you get your Sharingan?" Itachi elaborated. "Like you did, of course. I was born with it." Naruto cheekily. "So you're an Uchiha?" Sasuke stated in a question-like way. "On my dad's side," Naruto said as he continued to eat. "Two more questions, Itachi-san." Hiruzen and Kakashi looked at each other with wide eyes. "If it's on his dad's side," Kakashi started. "Then Minato had to have been." Hiruzen finished incredulously. "But how?" Kakashi blankly. "I don't know, Kakashi," Hiruzen said as he rubbed his temples. When he wanted the genin to see the future, he didn't expect all this. "I'm too old for this shit," thought to himself as he could already feel his headache coming on. "How are you able to maintain the Mangekyo Sharingan without going blind, let alone an eternal one?" Itachi asked. "What do you mean go blind?" Sasuke asked. "Once you've achieved a natural Mangekyo Sharingan, the next phase of our dojutsu's evolution, because of its strain on our eyes, it causes the USESR to go blind. The only way to get around its defects would be to implant another Uchiha's Mangekyo into your own eye," Itachi explained as his eyes stayed concentrated on the blonde. "So I ask you again, how did you do it?" Itachi asked a bit more forcefully. Seeing where his brother was going, Sasuke started at the blonde as well with a hint of suspicion. "If you are insinuating that I have traded my original eyes for the eyes of another, then you are wrong," Naruto said coolly. "I have had my Mangekyo since I was 5 years old. I unlocked the eternal Mangekyo when I lost my team at the age of 8. How I am able to maintain it is due to my unique circumstances." Itachi and Sasuke were both shocked at what he said. How did he activate them at such a young age? Itachi thought, wondering what the blonde could have gone through to unlock them that early. "What unique circumstances?" Itachi inquired. "Well, I'm sure you are aware of my tenant, Itachi-san," Naruto replied as he finished his dinner. "I mean, you were one of my Anbu guards, Weasel." Itachi had more questions, but had reached his limit. He had a feeling that Naruto was hiding something when he answered the last question, however, he let it go. He nodded to the blonde, silently letting him know they were finished. Seeing that they all were finished with their meal, Naruto stood up, tossing his stick into the woods. "Well, let's get some rest. We have a long journey back home tomorrow," Naruto said as he stretched. "Itachi? I will be getting your information as we journey to Konoha." Itachi nodded at him, although he had one more concern that was eating at him when he returned back. "Anyo, I will the Hokage feel about this, Naruto-san?" "Do not worry about that, Itachi. I will handle everything, Naruto said. Oh, and Sasuke? Yeah? Sasuke answered as he stood up and stretched his limbs as well. Please try and forgive your brother, Naruto advised. He is your brother and only family you have left. Cherish him. Settle whatever differences amongst yourselves and stick together. Not everyone has the privilege of having one. Sasuke hesitantly nodded at him. Oh, and I will be asking you a few questions about one little red-headed friend you have, Naruto said. You know Karen? Sasuke asked, slightly surprised. Indeed, me and her have some personal history with each other. I would like to see her at a later time, Naruto said as he walked up to a tree. Well, I'll see you guys in the morning. Oyasumi nasai, he said before disappearing up the tree. Itachi and Sasuke just stared at each other. It was like they were having a silent conversation. After what had felt like an eternity, they both gave each other a simple nod. Sasuke sat under a tree at the base of its trunk. He took one last look at his brother before shutting his eyes. What was he going to do now that he had knew the truth? That was the million-dollar question Sasuke kept asking himself as he allowed his body to settle. He allowed himself to drift off to sleep, his old home being his last thought before giving into the darkness. No one said anything as the scene went black. Everyone was either too shocked, too confused, too surprised, or too stumped to say anything. I think you broke them, Kit, Kurama said. It would seem so, Naruto replied. Kurama caught the faint amusement in the blonde's tone. Although Kurama had to admit that it was quite entertaining, he wondered of the reasons behind his host's amusement. Tell me, what about this situation beguiles you, Naruto? Kurama asked curiously. I am interested in how they feel about me now that they have found out that not only am I the son of the late Yondaime, but I am related to 2 Hokages, I am an Uchiha, I was in the Anbu, and that I am a part of a legendary clan. Naruto mused to his friend. Maybe they will think highly of you, Kurama said sarcastically. I suppose they will. However, that will not matter to me, Naruto replied. Oh? Kurama said inquisitively. One of the abilities of the arts of deception is to show one's true character. They will only want to befriend me or give me any attention out of pity, guilt, or counterfeit interest. Naruto said. There are 2 types of sight and insight. Sight is simply the ability to see, look, and watch. It is a 1-2-dimensional perspective of things and is linear. It is only aware of the surface and sometimes reaches slightly underneath. Then there is insight. Insight is having a knowing and understanding. It is a vision that goes far beyond the things that are in front of you and is a viewpoint of context and depth. It is a 3-dimension perspective that never travels one path and has dexterity to look underneath the underneath, he explained. Most of these people in the room never tried to understand me. They only saw what they wanted to see. They never questioned why I did the things that I did. They just made assumptions, Naruto said with a grimace. To them, I am now just some enigma they're trying to solve for their own interests. It wouldn't be a genuine relationship. It would just be forged interest that they tell themselves it's sincere. I don't need their pity nor do I need their nonsensical apologies. It is rather a waste of valuable time, he concluded. So you're not going to forgive them? Kurama asked, intrigued by the blonde's answer. You can't forgive something you never resented or hated, Naruto said cheekily. You should know that I found my life in this mask of mine rather amusing and revealing, besides the beatings the banshee gave me. That was the part of the mask I dreaded the most, he replied as his sweat dropped. Kurama laughed heartily at his kit. You are by far my most entertaining and interesting host yet, he said as his laughter died down. Naruto smiled at his longtime friend. Of course, I am. I am Naruto Uzumaki, god damn it. Datbeo, he said, striking his good guy pose. Don't forget, Namikaze Uchiha. Maybe Otsutsuki as well, Kurama teased, while saying the last part thoughtfully. Hi, Kurama-sama, Naruto said humorously with a bow. They both laughed at their minor banter. When they were calm, Naruto spoke again. Anyo, Otsutsuki? Naruto inquired, not familiar with that last name. We will talk about it later, Kurama said with a yawn before receding into the farther depths of his mind. Lazy fox, Naruto muttered under his breath. I heard that, you brat, Kurama yelled before going silent again. Naruto rolled his eyes as he began to pay more attention to the outside world. Everyone appeared to be still in shock. Some were looking at Naruto while others were looking at Sasuke. Some were looking between both Naruto and Sasuke, their eyes wide in disbelief. Some jaws were dropped to the floor while others were gaping like a fish. Before the Hokage could snap out of his own stupor, the screen glowed again and another scene began to play. Itachi and Sasuke Uchiha were having a glaring showdown. They were both sitting on the couch in the living room of the main house at the Uchiha compound. Both of them had a family photo album sitting in front of them with a single picture in both of their hands turned over. Lightning daggers sparked between the two as 21-year-old Sasuke and 26-year-old Itachi glared at each other. Ino and Sakura had hearts in their eyes staring at the two brothers. Although Sakura's heart belonged to Sasuke, she had to admit that Itachi wasn't bad to look at either. Ino on the other hand was thinking that maybe she was targeting the wrong Uchiha. "He looks just like Fugaku," Hiyashi commented. "Indeed he does," Shibi said in agreement. After a couple minutes of this glare match, Itachi flipped his picture over, revealing his firstborn son, Hiro Uchiha. "Baby Hokage," Itachi said as he flipped the picture over. "Princess Sharingan," Sasuke said as he flipped his picture over, revealing his firstborn daughter, Sarada Uchiha. They growled at each other, lightning sparks dancing between their eyes until they heard the sound of wives calling their name, making them both slightly pale. Itachi, Sasuke. With lightning speed, the both put their pictures back in their respective photo albums and put the photo albums back on the shelf before taking their seats once again. They sat back on the couch and acted like they were talking about clan business when their wives came in. Sakura had her arms crossed and glared at Sasuke while Itachi's wife, Haruka, stared at Itachi blankly as she held their child. "Itachi, dear," Haruka said with a sickly smile. "Yes, honey," Itachi responded with a light sweat. "What are you guys in here doing?" she said with the same sweetly sadistic look. Sasuke kind of shrunk behind his older brother as Sakura glared lightning bolts at him. Itachi laughed nervously. "Nothing, sweetheart, just discussing clan politics." He lied. Sakura and Haruka gave him a deadpanned look that said, "Really?" Shaking her head, Haruka turned around before turning towards the entrance. "Me and Sakura-chan are going shopping. We will be back home in time to make dinner," Haruka informed as she walked out. "Okay, have fun, dear," Itachi said, still lightly sweating. Sakura sent Sasuke one last glare before leaving as well. They both released a breath that they didn't realize they were holding. "Phew, that was close," Itachi said. Sasuke responded with a very Uchiha-like "HN," causing Itachi to sweat drop. They both stared at each other again. They both abruptly got up and retrieved the photo albums and pulled out the same pictures again before sitting back on the couch. Their glaring match returned as Sasuke was about to turn his picture over. "Uchiha Heim," Sasuke said as he flipped over his photo. "Baby Rokudame," Itachi responded as he flipped his photo over. "Sasuke, Itachi." Everyone laughed as the screen flicked off again. Sasuke was blushing in embarrassment while some of the women cooed at the moment. Even Naruto smirked at the expense of the duck butt head. Mebuki and Kijahi were chuckling at the antics of their future son-in-law while Sakura giggling. "That was so kawaii," Ino squealed. "And stupid," Kiba said as he rolled on the floor with laughter. A tick mark formed on both Sakura's and Sasuke's head as they glared at the Inuzuka air. "Can it, dog boy?" Sasuke growled, his face still flushed. "Ma, everyone, let's give my cute little genin a break," Kakashi said, who surprisingly hasn't pulled out his book since they started. "Whatever," Sasuke said with an eye roll. As Sakura was about to respond, the screen glowed again, revealing another scene, quieting the laughing audience down and capturing their attention. Sitting in the cage booth sat the cages of the 5 great shinobi nations as well as 2 cages from smaller ninja villages. In between the Hokage and Kase cage sat 32-year-old Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the cage of Uzushiogakure. His hair was styled like that of his father with the same red highlights on his side bangs, indicating his Uzumaki heritage. He wore his cage hat that was all black with white brimming. He wore a black sweatshirt with white stripes, black pants, and sandals. He had on a white cape that had a red flame pattern around the hem, that was held together by a red rope, and had the kanji for Godem Azukage written vertically down the back in red. He had his right arm was bandaged and he had a black facial mask adorning his face. A.N. Change the outfit and looks accordingly. Konohamaru Sarutobi, the Nanadem Hokage, was currently providing Naruto and Gaara the Kazekage with commentary on the new Chunin exams curriculum Konoha had adopted. Everyone stopped talking when the proctor of the final rounds stepped out into the arena floor. 33-year-old Sasuke Uchiha was sitting in the assigned clan sectioning in the booths set aside for clans. Beside him was his wife and son who looked excitedly as the proctor stepped onto the field. Itachi and wife and child was sitting in front of them. Sasuke watched as his family talked about the finals with excitement. His brother had his eyes closed with a light smile on his face as he watched his daughter Izumi and Daisuke started talking about who they thought would fight and who would win. It was moments like that that Itachi had reminded him of their father. Sasuke had to admit that he was a bit excited too. If his sources served him correct, Sarada was in the first match. He looked over to the Hyuga sections and saw clan matriarch and Hokage wife, Hanabi Hyuga, sitting with her children. Beside her were Naruto's oldest sons. The twins were discussing the exams enthusiastically, giving their own commentary of exam outlines, matches, and performances. He chuckled for they reminded him of a certain blonde knuckle-headed ninja he knew. Sasuke was cut out of his musings when the proctor called out the two opponents. Sarada Uchiha versus Araya of Suna. The match was interesting. At first it seemed like Araya was gaining an advantage on Sarada. He was initially repelling all of Sarada's attacks with ease and quickly cornering her. When he finally activated her Sharingan eyes, she realized that the Araya she was fighting was a fake and used her lightning ball to expose him. Flustered from so many people watching him, Araya's focus was ruined, allowing Sarada to gain the advantage and destroy the puppet. As a stand-in for the match, she eliminated Araya, winning the first match. Sakura cheered for her future daughter. "That's right, you were no match for an Uchiha, Shanaru," she exclaimed, pumping her fists into the air. Even Sasuke smirked at his daughter's win. "Oh please, forehead, she only won because the guy was distracted. He was kicking her ass the majority of the match," Ino said with an eye roll. A tick formed on Sakura's forehead while Sasuke scoffed at her comment. "What?" she yelled in anger. "You want to repeat that, pig?" It was Ino's turn for a tick mark to form on her forehead. "You heard what I said. Maybe should shrink that forehead of yours so you can hear better," Ino retorted. They both growled at each, lightning sparks passing between their eyes as they glared at each other. Everyone's sweat dropped at the two fangirls. The crowd cheered as the match ended. While the cages were talking about the match, the proctor returned to the arena floor. He announced the winner and called the next contestants. Teroi of Kumo vs Shikadai Nara. The match mostly consisted of Teroi attacking and Shikadai dodging and moving around the field. After a while, Shikadai was finally able to trap him in a shadow imitation technique. Using his own strength against, Shikadai made Teroi punch himself in the face, causing him to win his match by knockout. Shikamaru smirked at his son as he made his way off the field. Present Shikamaru and Shikaku smirked as well. "Your son grows up to be just like you, Shikamaru," Shikaku thought with a chuckle as he looked at his future grandson. The proctor called out the winner of that round as he returned to the arena grounds once again. He then called out the next fighters for the next round. Shinichiku Uzumaki Namikaze vs Shinki of Suna. The crowd grew quiet as the proctor called for the match to begin. In the stands, the Uzumaki twins were jumping and cheering loudly for their younger brother. Hanabi threatened a Yurkin fist to the stomach if they wouldn't be quiet. That instantly shut them up. In the cage's booth, Naruto and Gaara smirked. "This should be an interesting match," Naruto stated. "Indeed, it should, my brother," Gaara said in agreement. When the match started, Shinichiku swiftly went through hand signs and made an earth dome around himself. Everyone was confused of what he was doing. This confused Shinki as well. Suddenly everyone felt the ground shake and Shinichiku burst from the ground underneath Shinki with a lariat to the chin, sending him flying into the air. As Shinki was in the air, Shinichiku appeared behind him and sent him spiraling into the ground headfirst with the front lotus technique. "That's a lotus technique," Guy shouted. "How did he manage to learn one of your techniques, Guy-sensei?" Lee said loudly. "I don't know, my youthful student. Maybe if you'd both shut up, you'd figure it out." Kurenai snapped with a tick mark on the side of her head. "Troublesome," Shikamaru muttered as he looked at Naruto. The blonde was just staring at the screen as it continued to play. When Shinki got up from the crater that formed when he crashed, he noticed that his sand armor was cracked. He growled at this. He noticed that the earth dome was still up. Standing up, Shinki took his iron sand and formed it into a large hammer and smashed it into the dome, causing the dome to crumble. Before he could get caught under the debris, using an opening at the back of his kunai, Shinichikaru shunshined to the side of the wall before he could get hit. Under the smoke from the debris, Shinichikaru created 5 shadow clones, doing the seal with one hand. He instructed his shadow clones to spread his black Hirishin kunai along the walls of the stadium. He was a little nervous about them. As a sealing challenge, his father had challenged him to create his own seals for the Hirishin kunai instead of using his. It was hard at first, but with his persistence and determination, he finally did it. It was his first time using, so he could only hope they would work. He really wanted to impress his father today. When the smoke cleared, Shinki was standing in the middle of the arena floor surrounded by iron sand. He had covered the whole stadium floor with his sand to make it harder for his opponent to move. However, the crowd noticed the strange kunai along the sides of the wall. Across the stadium, Shinichikaru was squatting on the arena wall, analyzing the battlefield and looking at his opponent under a keen eye. Isn't that the 4th Hokage's Hirishin kunai? The Yondaime Tsuchikage, Kuritsuchi, asked with a hint of uneasiness. In a way, yes it is. Naruto replied coolly. No need to worry, Yondaime-sama. We are at peace. You do not have to be uneasy or uncomfortable around me. She nodded as she continued to watch the match. Suddenly they saw Shinichikaru disappear in a yellow flash, shocking everyone in the arena, including his opponent. Shinki was suddenly felt a punch to his face. Then he felt another. Then suddenly, a barrage of strikes were coming at him from different types of directions. From the audience point of view, all they could see were flashes of yellow going about the arena. The Azukage closed his eyes and smiled, nodding his head in approval. It was an ingenious plan. Naruto knew that his son had placed a Hirishin seal on his opponent's back. Using the kunai that were attached to the walls, he is able to strike and get away from his target without getting caught on the trapped arena floor. A brilliant idea indeed. That's my son. Datbeo, Naruto said as he watched his son in awe. The Hokage looked at the awestruck blonde and smiled. He was happy that not all of Naruto was fake. Getting frustrated, Shinki spiked his sand and aimed it at the Hirishin kunai along the stadium walls, knocking them down and complete destroying others. Shinichikaru teleported through another set of hand sign quickly before whispering his technique. Sweden. Great exploding water colliding wave, he said as he spewed out a massive amount of water, covering the entire arena floor with crushing waves. Shinki was overtaken by one of the waves and pushed to the edge of the arena. When water went down a little, he noticed that his sand was drenched in water. He then noticed that the arena was beginning to be covered in fog. Kirigakure no Jutsu, the Rokudame Mizukage, Chojuro, said as he looked at the arena in shock. Zabuza taught him that himself, Naruto commented. Chojuro turned to the Azukage. You know Zabuza? He asked curiously. Naruto turned to him. Why of course, Rokudame-sama. I was his apprentice after all. He said with an eye smile. Everyone looked at the Azukage in shock. Even Gaara and Konohamaru was shocked at the revelation. Naruto had never mentioned anything about that. Really? Gaara asked curiously. Hi. He wanted me to be his successor, but I turned it down. I thought my son would be better suited for it. Naruto replied before he turned back to the arena to watch the match. Seeing mist, Shiniki went to through a couple of hand signs before calling his jutsu. Futon. Kamikaze, he said as several tornadoes of wind began to appear in the arena. The mist cleared and the sand began to dry as they were taken up by the winds. He called his sand back to himself as the winds began to die down. What he didn't expect was for Shinichikaru to flash in front of him with a Rasengan. Before his sand could come to his defense, Shinki was hit in the chest by the Rasengan and sent crashing into the wall on the other side of the arena. As he was walking towards Shiniki to finish him off, he activated his dojutsu, revealing something that no one had ever seen before. Naruto grew nervous at that. He really didn't want to reveal that to anyone, however, part of him was curious of what Shinichikaru had learned about it. When Naruto first found out about it, he named it the Sage Eye, Sehai. Sage Eye. What is that dojutsu? Inochi asked, kind of amazed by it. I don't know, I've never seen it before. Hiruzen said as he looked at the child's eyes in slight. Naruto made sure to take a mental image of it. It would certainly be an interesting thing to look into in the future. He told Kurama that they would be discussing some things later. Everyone continued to watch the scene. Before anyone could question what dojutsu it was, a large man suddenly dropped in the middle of the arena, surprising everyone. This caused Shinichikaru to stop what he was doing and deactivate his eyes. He turned around to see the large man standing in the middle of the arena. He had purple pupil-less eyes that reminded Naruto of the Hyuga and had white skin. He was dressed in white robes and had a white cloth that draped over the left side of his face, covering it. His hands began to glow with red fire as he slammed into the stadium floor, causing the arena to shake. The walls of the stadium began to crack and the building began to crumble, causing the crowd to go into a panic. As this happened, two more men appeared with the same eyes and were smirking evilly. Jumping into action, the Azukage stood. "Get everyone out of here now," he told the cages as he jumped out of the box. He made eye contact with Sasuke and nodded to him. Sasuke nodded back and quickly went about clearing the stadium. Naruto landed next to his son. "Get Shiniki out of here. After that, do not come back. This is an order," Naruto said to his son, who was about to protest, but was silenced by his father's stern look. Nodding to his father, he went and grabbed Shiniki before disappearing in a flash. When his son was gone, Naruto's body became engulfed in flames. His cloak became enshrouded by golden fire while his undershirt was pitch black with glowing magatama surrounding his neck. Black lines ran the length of his pants seam as his eyes began to change. In his right eye was a Rinnegan with 9 tomo in the reins. In the left eye was a yellow eternal Mangekyo Sharingan with cross-like pupils. 9 truth-seeker orbs formed on around his back and a sage staff formed in his hand. Boruto looked at his father in awe as he landed beside him. "Whoa," Kiba said in awe as he looked at the adult Naruto. "So that's what I look like when I master your power, Kurama," Naruto mused to his tenant. "Unbelievable," Hiruzen said, complete shock and disbelief. "He truly is his reincarnation," Kurama thought to himself as he looked at his future kid through the eyes of his jailer. Once the arena was cleared, Naruto turned to his son, who standing at his right side. Boruto turned to his father with his Jugen activated and nodded to his old man. He then turned to Sasuke, who had just landed beside him on his left. He had his Mangekyo Sharingan activated as he glared at the 3 invaders. He turned to Naruto and nodded at him. Naruto nodded back before turning to the newcomers. Sasuke's Mangekyo Sharingan, Kamui, Naruto shouted as his Sharingan began to spin and all 6 of them disappeared in a vortex from the arena out of existence. The screen then flicked off, ending the scene. The matrix stopped glowing and returned to its original state. Once again everyone was speechless. Even Sasuke was at loss for words and didn't even know what to think anymore. His emotions were everywhere. He didn't know whether to be happy, mad, glad, relieved, or pissed. He was so confused about his emotions that it frustrated him. He unconsciously reverted his face back to its permanent scowl and silently walked back to his seat. "What the hell was that?" Ten said incredulously. "Hokage-sama?" Naruto said to Lord Third, speaking for the first time since his turn. Everyone was slightly shocked at his addressal, but not as shocked as Hiruzen. Naruto had never addressed him by his proper title before. "We need to talk after this," Naruto said in all seriousness, his eyes held no emotion. "Private," he stressed. Hiruzen nodded his head at the boy, signaling him that they would indeed have word after this. "So who would like to go next?" the Hokage asked. "That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.